Now, this celebration program is not intended in any way at all to be a historical documentary. All we're trying to present to you is an informal reintroduction of some of the people who have helped to make television.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing, everything the traffic will allow. Nowhere could you get that happy feeling when you are stealing that extra bow. There's no people like show people, they smile when they are low. Yesterday they told you you would not go far. That night you open and there you are. Next day on your dressing room they've hung a star. Let's go on with the show.
Oh, I've got a marvellous trick for you. I do hope you like it. It's a little thing with a... Well, it isn't mine, actually. I saw this one on television the other day. I thought it was very clever. The fellow had an ordinary handkerchief, and he put this handkerchief in his right-hand pocket, pushed it into it. You won't believe this, ladies and gentlemen, but I actually saw this happening with my own two pairs of eyes, and I thought it was marvellous. He pushed it into his right-hand pocket, and he just went like this, and it disappeared from his right-hand pocket, and he took it out of his left-hand pocket. It's clever stuff, isn't it? But the best bit was when he put it back in his left-hand pocket, and then he just went again, and it jumped over to his right-hand pocket. Marvellous. Oh, I guessed how he did it. He must have had a hollow body, you know. Must have gone, well, you couldn't do it any other way. Oh, it tickles.
Have you got the time, please, sir?
It's 1:30.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. Can I just borrow your watch for
Just a minute, it's my best watch there,
right,
isn't it?
Now, this is your watch, sir, isn't it?
Well, of course it is, you know it is. You just
That's
took
right.
it all from me,
I
haven't
shall just wrap it up in this handkerchief, sir. Now, I want you to watch your watch. You're watching your watch, are you?
No,
You've got your watch.
watching it.
Right, now, have you ever thought of selling your watch, sir?
No.
Right, you haven't thought of selling your watch. Well, it's just about to come under the hammer now, sir. You look worried, sir. I'm worried. If the trick doesn't work, I don't work. Oh, look. Let's see how it does.
Well, that's a fine trick, isn't it?
Go.
The most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Maria, 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 Maria. All the sounds of the earth in a single word. Maria, 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 Maria. Maria, I just kissed a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name will never be the same to me. Maria, say it loud, and there's music playing. Say it soft, and it's almost like praying. Maria, I'll never stop saying Maria.
I once had a pain in my chestal area, up here, high above my fabulous hips. And I was convinced that it was heartburn, because I was married at the time, and my wife used to cook for me all the time with those Nazi recipes, you know, chicken Himmler for dinner every night. And I didn't want to spend $25 to go to the doctor and have it reaffirmed that I had heartburn, because it wasn't worth it. But a friend of mine at that time got a pain in the exact same spot. And I figured if I could get him to go to the doctor, I could figure out what's wrong with me. For nothing. So I talk him into it, and he goes. Costs him $25. He's got heartburn. And I feel fabulous because I beat the doctor out of $25. And I call my friend 2 days later, and he died. I check into the hospital immediately, you know. I have tests run and x-rays. Cost me $150. I had heartburn. I'm furious now. I run to my friend's mother. I say, did he suffer much? She says, no, it was quick. A car hit him and that was it.
Lights! Angels and ministers of grace, defend us. Be thou spirit of health or goblin damned. Bring with the airs from heaven or blast from hell. Be thy intents wicked or charitable, thou comest in such unquestionable shape that I will speak to thee.
It's off. It's off. It's not working.
No, it's not. I've got it here.
It's not working.
The mic isn't working.
It's not working.
Do you mean I've been spouting through the thing and it hasn't been coming? I must have looked silly standing there. I'll get the stage manager to... stage manager! Something seems to have gone wrong with the microphone. I'm terribly sorry.
Nothing to do with me.
No, I didn't say it was, but I mean...
I can't go around looking after measly microphones like that.
No, I didn't ask you to, but I thought maybe...
This is an electrician's job.
Yes, well, could we please have the electrician to sort of tinker with it, or...
All right. Hang around, I'll see if I can locate him. Charles? Charles?
Charlie!
How much?
$5.
$5. Take me down to the first floor. Silly boy. I was only joking. Of course you shall have $5. There you are. There it is. That's it. What's for the gag? That's it. Well, these things go wrong, don't they? It can't be helped. Well, I got out of the hotel and I eluded the house detective. He's a very nice fellow called Opportunity. They call him that because he only knocks once. Hello, it. What a hotel. The walls were so shaky the termites had to wear parachutes. That's the first good laugh of the evening. God bless you.
What should we play? What would be a good number to play as a duet, huh?
Oh, I don't know. How about the Rondo Capriccioso by Saint-Saëns? That's a good one.
I don't know. That's been done to death, you know?
You're going to dance something presently. A ballet dance. Do you like doing ballet at school?
Like it?
Yes.
Can you teach anyone to dance?
Yes, sure.
How easy is it?
Come and I'll show you.
Remember Fred Astaire? Set it up, putting on the top hat. Fasten up the white tie, brush it up the tail.
Are you going to take it up seriously?
I shouldn't think so.
Aren't you? Why not?
I want to be a writer.
Oh, do you?
half a pound of boot polish on her eyeballs.
Seul, debout, en ces jours de feu et de poussière, en face du sommeil, accablé de la terre, assourdi par le cri des cigales sans nom. Je cherchais votre cœur comme je cherchais Baby, I really need you. I can't go to Chicago because you know I got a truck now, baby. Come on, mama, I gotta go. I really, you know, I really love you and I need you and I want you, baby. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Oh, well, oh, well, oh, well. Oh, well, oh, well, oh, well. Oh, well, oh, well, oh, well. Oh, well,
May I just ask you a question? Please do. Right. Well, with the safety match is brown in its own right on the head, which, you know, can strike it on the ordinary box. Yes. Where there's various colours for striking on the rough surfing. What's your choosing?
I suppose I like the redheads.
Oh, yeah. Well, I must say this, that while these matches do their float in the space relayers, that is top, mid-load and bottom, there's no official striking.
Oh, I see.
Seen a karaoke. It's not a foxtrot or a polka. It has a little bit of new rhythm, a blue rhythm that sighs. It's got a rhythm that is tricky, a bit of wicky wacky wicky. And when you dance it with a new love, there'll be true love in her eyes.
Tony Bennett too. He got toilet, toilet, and the toilet twist. That's how it's gotta feel. Frank's song, so you should do it, Frank. Deeper than the deep blue seas, that's how deep it goes, if it's real. Frankie Lane. When somebody needs you, it's no good unless you need you. Whoa, through the good Orleans. Come with me, little Dean, of course. Uno, la Rovelina. Only who will say me.
read the question very carefully. The joke carefully, and I want you to study it first before you laugh. Here we go, friends. It's a very pretty dress. I wish we had color television. Is it true that two peanuts were walking across Piccadilly Circus and one was assaulted?
Down the way where the nights are gay and the sun shines daily on the mountain top, I took a trip on a sailing ship, and when I reached Jamaica, I made a stop. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. Had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Down at the market, you can hear ladies cry out while on their heads they bear. Ackee rice, salt fish are nice, and the rum is fine any time of year. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. Had to leave a little girl in Kingston town.
Okay, you better lead the way.
A right and a right. And
Follow
a left,
this.
and a left and a hop, 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 hop.
Ah. All right, Don, take it, man.
Public here that go out for a night out, see? They want to have a bit of a sing-song, don't they? Want to have a lot of song.
What do you think I've been doing for the past quarter of an hour but singing?
Yeah, what I mean, all due respect, I mean, people don't want all that woo-wah stuff all the time, do they?
Some people like...
No, they want something, a bit of a tune to it.
I dilly, I dally, I dally, I dilly, I lost the way and don't know where to go. Oh, who's gonna put up the old iron bedstead if I can't find my way out? Oh, my old man says, follow the man, and don't you dilly-dally on the way. Off went the band with my own minute, I followed on with my own crumble in it. I dilly, I dally, then I dilly, lost my way and don't know where to run. Oh, you can't trust a special when you've got a reputation, and you can't find your way. Keep going my way, your way, oh!
I get married in the morning, window milk and shine. So let's go out, let's have a while, let's get into the church on time. I'm gonna be there in the morning, first stop and looking in my bride. Nose gone kiss me, show how to miss me, let's get into the church on time.
That's enough. Well, here we go with Calick Go the Shears.
Shit.
Out in the shed, the old shearer stands, grasping his shears in his thin, bony hand. Fixed is his gaze on a bare-bellied young. Glory, if he gets her, won't he make the ringer go? Click, go the shears, boys, click, click, click.
Wide is his soul and his hands move quick. The ringer looks around and is beaten by a blow.
And curse the old dagger with the bare-bellied young.
These works were forgotten, and that song, written over 30 years ago, has never, so far as we know, been sung in this country before tonight, nor is any part in the rise and fall of the city of Mahagoni.
Don't show us the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For we must find the next whiskey bar. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. Oh, moon of our
We now must say goodbye. We've lost our good old mama and must have whiskey, oh, you know why. Oh, moon of Alabama, we now must say goodbye. We've lost our good old mama and must have whiskey, oh, you know why.
Well, cheers.
Choo-choo to Broadway, oh Cincinnati, don't get icky with a 1, 2, 3. Life is just so fine on the solid side of the line. Rip, hold tight, hold tight, hold tight, hold tight. Rack-a-sack, you want some seafood, mama? Shrimps and rice, they're very nice.
There be you, let there be me, let there be oysters under the sea, let there be wind and occasional rain, chili con carne, sparkling champagne. Let there be birds to sing in the trees, someone to bless me whenever I sneeze. Let there be cuckoos, a lark and a dove, but most of all, please, let there be love.
Here they are, they're doing a spot of Strauss.
Could I have the music once again? Thank you. Never mind the lights. Angels and ministers of grace defend us. Be thou spirit of health or goblin dam. Bring with the airs from heaven or blast from hell. Be thy intents wicked or charitable, thou comest in such unquestionable shape. What's the matter now?
It's off again.
Well, I haven't touched the thing. Stage manager! Look, I'm looking a bit ridiculous up here. I'm doing my best. I'm sorry, but the microphone still isn't working. I can't project myself unless I...
You're becoming a bit of a bore, aren't you? I've got more things to do than dash around and administer to your every whim. You're a bit of a shy, aren't you?
Could I have the electrician? I can talk to him, and if I can have the electrician...
I'll ask him, but I'm sure he'll be absolutely livid. Charles? Charles?
Charlie!
I shall have life everlasting, holding my Savior's hand. I shall rejoice in the rescue, holding my Savior's hand, free from this world and its sorrow, from all doubt and fear. Oh, I shall rejoice forever in my Savior's hand.
Ah, she came to see me off on the station, folks. Isn't that great? Ah, shucks.
Oh, I do wish I was coming with you, though.
Ah, she wishes she was coming with me. Oh, you're too ducky.
Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like a melody that's sweetly played in tune, as fair afar thy
the pale moon shining on the fields below. The folks are crooning soft and low. You needn't tell me, boy, because I know, yes, when it's sleepy time down south, yes, the soft wind blowing through the pine wood trees. The folks down there live a life of ease. When old Mammy falls on her knees, yes, when it's sleepy time down south, yes.
Oi! I say, boy.
Now I go window cleaning to earn an honest bob. For an nosy passer, it's an interesting job. Come on, now it's a job that just suits me. A window cleaner you would be if you can see what I can see when I'm cleaning windows.
Cheers. And if you go out, when you go out there, I mean, you'll just have so much fun with your wife and your children. I'll have another one, Pete. Yeah. Yeah. You'll have such fun. You'll have such a real time. I'm telling you, your wife will love it. Your children will love it, too. Well, cheers. And then... Then when you feel that you've had a full day out in the open air, I'm telling you, I'll have another one, Pete. Yeah, and you'll feel that you really have something, you know, that you had, and you'll feel fine. Oh yeah, here you are. There's the change. Fine. All right. Cheers. Yeah, you'll feel fine. Yeah. Shit, bring them. A bunch of rats.
Yay, oh, yay, oh, yay, oh, yay. Hello, one's got fruit.
Well, that's about it then.
So now I'd just like to say 3 little words. Good night, good luck, and God bless.
Get over me! Stop coming here!
Good night.
It was wonderful. I'm still tasting it.
Thank you very, very much.
Bye.
Good evening. I am glad to have the opportunity to say goodbye to my British public.
And that's it, is it? Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
This is the BBC television service. The time you are looking at does not necessarily bear any relation to the real time. It is merely a decorative clock put there for you to look at and enjoy before the next program. And now I am informed that we can in fact go over to cricket, the first test against the Sri Lankans at a cricket ground. And we join the match as a run has just been scored. That's a good ball. I can't quite see from here, and a different batsman seems to be batting now. Doing very well there, running 2. That'll be caught, I think. Yes, and he's out.
I say, I thought it was a test match. Who's the fellow in one piece?
I think it's Ian Botham, sir. Silly mid-on.
What, with a body like that?
He's been on a diet, you know.
Nothing lovelier than the sound of willow thrashing on skin.
Let the test match commence.
Just like a sauna bath here at Lord's as well. 22 for no wicket. We don't have all the natural appendages that go with it, but we can tell you we have plenty of excitement. Philip de Freitas is the man. And taking strike against him at Lord's in 1991 is Brendan Karupu.
They are slimming him down, but you know, he's not losing weight fast enough. I mean, we've got to move things on here. Move things on.
Yeah.
Move things on.
Move things on. You should look like that. That's the kind of person we want. There's only one man can do it, Arnold.
McFadden, yes.
He's expensive.
McFadden can do the job.
But we can bribe him with sexual favors, I think.
No.
Back in the studio, there was a hushed air of expectation.
You be the Fokker Wolf, okay? Here we go, Tony! Take that, you...
Right, now let me give you a wee tip, Nursey. Never creosote a fence before an operation. How's pre-op going? Managed to get rid of all the bum fluff?
Yes, Dr. McFadden. You can see your reflection in his cheeks. Look. Oh, saucy.
Here we are. Thanks, Mother. Bye. This is it, Maureen, the big one. The day my idea's going to practice.
The final preparations were made.
All right, we don't know what the DG is going to be looking like. He is going to be standing there. I suggest you don't get too close.
Right, yep.
Splendid, right. What's the matter with you?
Well, you always talk to him. You never talk to me about anything.
I do. I just did.
Right, there we go, boys and girls. One new look Director General. Don't applaud, just throw money. What a fantastic nose. Oh, Crevens.
Twiddle the wobbly thing, can you, Derek? Twiddle, please. Mix.
Let him in through the front door, would you? What? The Director General's on his way. He's wearing what?
Okay, studio. Ready for one of the most important programs in the history of broadcasting. Q Vision. Q Sound. If this doesn't work, we're dead meat. Mix. Q Hanky Man. Q Thumbsy Man. Here he comes now, studio. My God. He looks incredible.
A mighty maze of mystic magic rays is all.
Checking closer. Camera 2. The voice is too low. Can you help me? Sound? Can you help me? Can you? Sound, are you deaf? Pump in the estrogen. More. That's fantastic.
He's absolutely fantastic,
it's marvelous.
isn't he?
I could almost fancy him myself.
So could I.
Now, don't go too close. The stubble's not very convincing. Is that a bogey or a hair up the nose? 3 stone in 3 days. A marvellous loss. Now we're coming for the climax now. On your toes, everyone. And sound, give me more. Excellent curtain.
Well, that's a wrap, studio, and because such a milestone in television history would be impossible to follow, Lime Grove Studios will now close down. Thank you. Mine's a pint, Edmundo.
Yeah, push off. Go on, clear the studio. I've got to get this place cleared up. Mind this microphone. You're never going to get the camera through those doors.
Oh, put the brakes on. Oh, I'm not pushing this thing anymore.
Oh, for goodness sake, you'll never get it through that gap.
I've pushed it all the way from the Quatermass set. Oh, my back's gone now.
Right, that's it. I'm going to go over here and have a turn. I'm going to have a funny turn.
Hey? Where?
Whoops, there I go.
So, what are you talking about? I can't see nothing.
See you in the pub.
Stop with that.
Night.
This is the BBC television service. And now another marvellous effort from the clock department leads us into one of the most popular programs of the 1970s. As they used to say, let's go nationwide.
Nationwide, absolutely brilliant.
Honest-to-goodness tabloid television.
It had the confidence to ignore the news, ignore current affairs if they were boring.
Nationwide made this country, Britain, an entity.
The first BBC programme I ever worked on that printed its own notepaper.
Damn sight more than skateboarding ducks, you know.
Nationwide ran for 14 years, from September 1969 to August 1983. In all, 3,131 editions of Tea Time Current Affairs. At its peak in the mid-70s, over 12 million people tuned in every evening for a unique mix of hard news stories,
sentences totaling 4,000 years to 35 IRA men and women,
investigative consumer journalism,
The Knockout will be on BBC One at
a regional roundup.
Tonight, if you want to watch it, I'm sure many of you do. Let me know, very quickly go over to Bristol if I can, and Brian Roberts, I gather you some news for us.
Yes, and some good news just
a nationwide speciality, the light-hearted item.
Throw your mind back to the merry month of July and ask yourselves how on earth these young maidens could have been responsible for a serious attempt to deal with the problem affecting half the men and women in Britain.
Tea's ready! Mom, can you bring the tomato sauce, please?
Get it yourself, you lazy so-and-so.
One of the things you wouldn't expect is two of Britain's brightest brains deserting the academic panoply of gown and lecture theatre for the sanctity of a TV set. But what is this TV programme that's ensnared the colossal minds of Dr. Charlotte Brunsdon and Dr. David Morley? Believe it or believe it not, it's only too familiar.
It was a period when the real research on television current affairs was all on hard news stories. And one of the reasons that Nationwide was interesting is precisely because it didn't seem very interesting. It's precisely because it seemed to be about nothing.
Mrs. Glynn, when you bought this Puerto Rican packet, did you seriously think that you were buying instant sea pets?
It was, as I understand it, the most popular current affairs programme among all respondents in the BBC's own audience research. It was clearly a very important programme.
To her loving heart.
And yet it seemed to be dealing with trivia.
Michael, do you always sing while you're working?
Fundamentally, there was a tremendous loyalty for the regional programmes. People all over the country were switching on to Look North, to Points West, to Scene Around 6, all those programmes. And then they were going away. And so we decided to try to latch on to that regional loyalty and developed the Nationwide style and theme as a consequence.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
When the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff.
Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man.
You all did see that on the Lupercal, I thrice presented him with a kingly crown. Okay?
Once Nationwide began to build a decent audience at tea time, and that put the spine on the whole of the BBC One audience right through the rest of the evening, it was virtually immovable. The BBC didn't know what it had given birth to. And I suspect if it had known, it probably wouldn't have done it. It was this popular appeal programme that had a soul.
Alex, can you talk to TK Supervisor, please?
Nationwide was very plain speaking, and I think that what it encouraged in its viewing audience was a trust. They knew that at the end of every day they could turn it on, it would be there, it would be very familiar, very trustworthy. They would be told what was going on in the world in words of one syllable.
One of the things Nationwide represents is an attempt by the BBC to make ordinary television, popular television, but television which also involves people. So it's going to be news that isn't about other people, but in some curious way about the audience themselves. So that one was just sitting quietly in your living room. You'd just be sitting quietly in your living room, eating your tea, watching Nationwide, and then you suddenly find yourself asking questions to a member of state. You know, the Nationwide reporter would be saying, well, what we want to know, what the viewer at home wants to know.
So let's go straight to Vic Feather, who I know is going to be called in that film by somebody, Big Brother. Vic, this is a sample here in front of me in this tray of the kind of interest aroused in the country in you. And in Bangor, a Port Maddox schoolteacher, Mr. Jones. He wants to know, Mr. Feather, your arrogance and pomposity seem bent on bringing the government down. Should you not be helping this great country of ours in its economic plight instead of playing into the hands of communists?
Would you ask me to answer this?
I would ask you to.
I see.
In the 5 years that I was editor, the extraordinary thing is that more than 10,000 ordinary people appeared in the programme, giving their views on national issues, giving their views on local issues.
I'd like to ask Pam Bedard in Manchester, if she can hear us, to put her question to Vic Feather.
I'd like to ask why I should join the union.
Yes, what occupation is yours?
I'm a reporter.
A reporter? Well, first of all, I think that if you didn't join a union, you mightn't be a reporter very long, but that's quite apart.
It wasn't the BBC speaking, it was the BBC providing an opportunity for the nation to speak to itself. And that was the really important thing. No one got in the way.
It's often been said that Nationwide itself was a family, and so it really was. I hate to say it, but I've been called Dad sometimes, and I'm going to call Sue Lawley Mum. But anyway, we really were a together team, a family. And out there were families we were talking to. Granny watched, little Tommy watched when he came home from school. Mum watched while she was making the high tea or the dinner. And Dad, if he got home in time, he watched too. We embraced those families, and they in turn embraced us.
Gnome File, Case History 68, and the home of Mrs. Harris. There are no secrets in her garden. Mrs. Harris is a proud gnome owner. They're on display for the outside world to see.
Nationwide really did speak to something about the way in which people understand themselves. They understand themselves often. The real me is not me at work, it's me at home doing what I want to do.
Mrs. Margaret Miller gets tea ready, keeping an eye on 2-year-old Vanessa. Graham, aged 8, and Tracy, 9, play quietly by themselves. While in the front room, textile worker Ron Miller and 6-year-old Gary are absorbed in a favourite programme. They watch on even though they know there's a snag. The wrong side's going to win again. Indians biting the dust. That's why Saturday mornings at Bankfield Terrace are different.
Like the Seminole, Navajo, Kickapoo, like those Indians, I'm an Indian too.
It's like all these attempts to try and have good news programmes. It's so unnewsworthy that the logic of it is that they're pushed towards the eccentric and the quirky.
Was then no doubt that there were extraordinary, unusual, larger-than-life characters throughout the UK. And in the course of the history of Nationwide, a great many of them, if not all of them, appeared on the programme.
I think Nationwide was really a pioneer in kind of Britain as a theme park and a certain kind of heritage idea of what Britain was.
Frank, it's Dave Rowley on 3360.
There's Sark. Now, I know Sark's been done to death at the stories, but it's such a lovely place over there. And the thing is, they're getting this new dame, and he's a man.
Anyone who did a pompous job but was rash enough to allow themselves to have a weasel put down their trousers. So Vickers.
The minute you walked in the joint, I could see you were a gal of distinction, a real big spender.
The Reverend Andrew Dowell, a young curate from Manchester, is the owner of a most singular talent.
people who prided themselves in the number of raw eggs they could swallow.
Any sort of physical deformity. And brave troopers as well.
Oh!
Nationwide was a Bible of cliché, you know, and basically in comedy what you're doing is taking cliché and pointing out that it is cliché. And I found it was a wonderful training ground for Not 9 O'Clock News, which were only afterwards.
Mr. Weemley, can you hear me?
Well, that's all we have time for now, because now we can go to Bristol for news of an earlier story. I believe that there in Bristol you have news of a duck that does nothing.
No, we've got a pheasant that roller skates and a man who sits in trees and shits on passers-by.
I always wanted to bring out a range of cuddly toys, which were based on, you know, like the Cabbage Patch toys. And you had the Bob Wellings, and you had the Michael Barrett, and you had the Sue Lawler, and you could get a complete set. I always pictured people putting them on their pillows when they went down to, you know, if you went into people's bedrooms, there'd be 6 Nationwide reporters all nice and soft and cuddly on the top.
You weren't worth your salt if you're a Nationwide reporter, and there was a funny place to do a piece to camera, and you didn't do it there, so it was top of Tower Bridge, hanging off a bus.
Or, of course, in a jacuzzi.
Keep young and beautiful. It's your duty to be beautiful. Keep young and beautiful if you want to be loved.
You could go from doing a story about a savings bank going broke, serious story, threatening a lot of people and the bank, to jumping in a river to demonstrate that where this river met the sea there was a dangerous rip and that it was dangerous to children in summertime and to bathers. So the way you demonstrated that was on the principle of don't tell me, show me. The reporter jumps into the river, swims as hard as he can against the tide, and is seen to be going backwards.
Those are the days. But of course, nobody would ask you to do a thing like that these days.
There's a phrase in comedy which is pull back to reveal no trousers. And which is, you know, that you start the camera tight on someone's face and then you pull back to reveal the fact that they're standing naked in a bath of yogurt. And that was constantly used the whole time, and you knew it was coming.
As a Nationwide reporter, you had to be able to tackle anything from interviewing, say, Edward Heath, to some extraordinary animal.
Hey, are you the only... Hey, are you the only trained piglet in the world? You are.
Daft, really, and of course there's no program nowadays where that kind of thing could happen. I wonder if I could have your views on Tibet and the chances of its independence.
We always had animals on because the editors believed in what they called the ah factor. Ah, what a lovely dog. Ah, what a lovely baby. Ah, what a lovely this.
Darling, be a good girl. Oh, little limpy foot. Little limpy foot. Don't be too long about it.
She does attempt to mate with me, and does actually have an animal orgasm, if that means anything to you. Does it?
Yeah, it does, except I don't know how you would detect it in a duck.
Oh, wouldn't you?
No.
Well, I can't explain that.
Daniel first started playing and winning at water skiing earlier this summer. In fact, after only a few weeks, with the help of his owner, 14-year-old Helen Rogers, he won the local water ski championships. Well, the dog section anyway.
The skateboarding duck was a duck that had actually learnt to operate and run up and down on the skateboard and became a household name overnight. I mean, we had to keep on repeating this film and showing more and more and more about the duck. It was very funny to watch, and the duck actually was very clever. It became quite proficient, and it could actually turn the skateboard around. The other animal stories that we actually had on Nationwide were, for instance, Boozy the snail, who I suppose you call the snail an animal, but he was reputed to drink a pint of beer.
That is an extraordinary sight. Does he get tipsy now? He's beginning to keel over now, I think.
I'll just make the beer a little bit frothy, because otherwise the snail might just fall in the glass.
Before he absolutely keels over and disgraces himself.
Can you see the mouth on the cat? He just had a little bit of froth. I'll put him down for some more.
Right on cue, live on the air before 10 million viewers, he crawled up the side of the glass, took a little sip of beer and fell over backwards dead. Now, I was very sorry for the snail, but at the same time I had to recognise the fact the snail did make brilliant television.
Embarrassing moments? I've got a classic here. Bob.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you very much indeed.
Your turn next.
Oh, thanks very much.
Now here we have a lady who's a High Court judge.
Yes.
So, how do I address her?
Well, male High Court judges in this country are knighted, and lady High Court judges have the title Dame conferred on them. So it would be, if you meet her socially, it would be Dame, whatever her Christian name is.
Yes.
On the bench, it would be Your Ladyship or My Lady or Sir.
I'm so sorry. I must apologise, actually, to our actors who've been standing here for a very long time under the lights. Do just stay there. Can we actually go past our poor judge? They have been very patient, standing on these hot lights for a very long time. We should have provided chairs. We didn't.
It was something that touched ordinary people's hearts. But it really had strong standards. It had standards of fairness, of objectivity, of journalism. And I'll tell you something else. It was a sort of strangely Reithian programme. You know, I would make a film about the woman in Banbury who'd been to 8,000 weddings because she went to a registry office herself, and it's a tear-jerking, wonderful story, and it would be followed by a 15-minute analysis that was done well, well-directed, about, you know, the problem of the dirty protest in Northern Ireland. Now, that's Reith.
If you think someone came down and just watched Nationwide and tried to get a picture of Britain in the 70s from watching Nationwide, they'd have this picture of this country which was populated entirely by mad vicars who liked railway trains, and people who dressed up in frocks, men who dressed up in frocks to go in front of cameras, and people who grew very large vegetables and skateboarded on top of nuns. And if you walk out the door afterwards, you wouldn't recognise the country at all. It's a complete fantasy. But it's a sort of conspiracy between everyone to believe that this is the truth about it.
Here we go. Another epic is launched. Over to you, Chris.
And I'm sure there's plenty of cream from the West Country also.
Put these on.
Watch the waistline of Frank.
Hurry up, Frank. You're going to be late.
Coming, darling.
Beep bop Lula, she's my baby.
I'm afraid I must.
Okay, everyone. Have a nice time.
Bye, darling.
Don't keep those kids out too late. They've got school in the morning.
All right.
Bye.
Line to remind Stuart Hall and Mike Neville about the time we got past 3,000. Don't lose this one, Mike. Good luck, everybody. Un momento.
Thank you very much indeed. What a prince you are. And thank you very much for the cake. So from all of us, thank you and goodbye.
Hello, if you just joined us, you missed some interesting programmes. Between 3 and 4 o'clock, we had films from the Tonight programme and an untransmitted part of Doctor Who, which was really fabulous, but you missed that. Between 5 and 7 o'clock, we had the cricket, which I'm not very interested in, unless it rains in big blobs like this till about 8 o'clock, and then it's quite a laugh to see them scampering off the pitch into the pavilion. Moving across here to the evening chart, coming up at 7-ish, you'll see What's My Quiz. I was in a quiz programme once. They asked me when it was going to rain. I got it wrong. We've got the Lime Grove documentary at 9. At 10 o'clock, it's Quite a Mess, which I remember being frightened by as a child, and that programme is going to terrify everyone down the western side of the country, except for people in Norfolk who are used to spooky things happening. That's all for now.
This is the BBC television service. And now Frank Muir introduces What's My Quiz?
games. Probably the most popular item of popular television in the 50s. Cheap to produce, live, so there was an element of danger. The games were worth playing, well, they had to be. The BBC wasn't allowed to give away prizes more glittering than a book token. And the presenters, then, weren't elderly comics interrupting the proceedings with strings of cheeky one-liners. Oh no, back in the 1950s, nobody could have accused Professor Glyn Daniel, presenter of Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, of being a cheeky chappie.
Good evening and welcome to the beginning of another season of Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, in which you are invited and some experts to assist you in identifying objects which come from a museum.
Hello, how are you? All right? Jolly D. Well, we've got a new kind of game for you this afternoon. It's called Ask Your Dad, which is just about explains what the program is.
Now, before I explain the rules of this very simple little game, I'd like to introduce you to our panel. And first of all, we have that famous Lancashire novelist, Mr. Frank Tilsley.
Hello.
Who were the panellists who got these pioneer games to work? Well, it was a new medium, and there was no established pool of telepersons, so an extraordinary cross-section of people was invited to take part, most of whom did something quite different for a living. In the following sequence, you should be able to spot a conjurer, an actress or two, a lady doctor, a handsome mustachioed archaeologist, a schoolboy with impressive ears, an irascible ex-BBC outside commentator, and lastly, a distinguished writer and broadcaster who looked and sounded then like something on loan from the small mammal house.
Top of the table we have David Nixon. Good evening. Next to him, fresh as they say from her recent Broadway success, is actress Brenda Bruce.
Hello.
Isabel Barnett.
Good evening.
Mortimer Wheeler, who has come fresh back from Africa, where he's doing something for hippopotami in Zimbabwe.
I know that, you do.
Professor Thomas Bodkin, who's been at home.
I'm Davy Jones. I go to King's Norton Grammar School, and I'm nearly 15.
Radio stalwart of 20 questions, Miss Intuition herself, Anona Wynn.
And then Mr. Hugh Short, who says this is past his bedtime, and how right he is.
Barbara Kelly.
Hello.
And may I say, a little sadly, that this is the last time for some time we'll have Gilbert with us, Gilbert Harding.
We have Frank Muir.
Good evening, girls.
One side effect of the popularity of panel games was the birth of the TV celebrity, somebody who appeared on television so regularly that he or she became famous solely for being famous. It's difficult perhaps to credit nowadays, but in the 50s all viewers more or less watched everything. And what Gilbert Harding growled so rudely on What's My Line was the main talking point next day in train and shop. But there was a negative side to being a TV celebrity, or as I was once called, a TV celibate. Gilbert Harding, an intelligent and sensitive man, fell into despair being so successful at performing such a trivial role in life, and he died a deeply unhappy man. And Lady Isabel Barnett couldn't find her way back to stability away from the screen, and she committed suicide. Now, the common factor of all the great panel games was their simplicity. But as the search for new games to replace What's My Line became more frantic, their rules became more complex to the point of incomprehensibility. In the following couple of tryouts, note the hint of despair creeping into the eyes of the seasoned hosts as they try to explain the rules.
Now, we have two teams, of each team composed of two dads, a son and a daughter. And each team will play against the other to see who wins in the end. Now, I ask each family, as it were, a question, and they're allowed a minute in which to answer. For the first half minute, only the son can answer, and if he gets it right, he gets 2 marks, and Dad can help him only in mime. If the son does not get it, then the second half minute, Dad takes over, and he can't get any help from anybody, and if he gets it right, he only gets 1 mark. But if the family can't get the answer to the question, I'll tell them what that is and give them no marks.
There is only one rule to this program, one rule only. We have the money here, and the money is just for the asking. The rule is that people who ask for the money must not tell the truth. If we discover that a successful toucher subsequently has told the truth, then he or she will be disqualified. Now, the winner, apart from the normal television fees, will not receive the money that he or she asks for, but the winner will go forward to the eventual touching target of £500,000. Losers will get compensatory awards, but the winner can go forward to the next week with a new story and a new fixed touching target, which will become clear as we go on.
Oh, no, it won't. An important element in panel games was that viewers were in on the secret, if they wanted to be, right from the start. This was done on screen by what was then wondrous new technology.
We'll show you now exactly what Mr. Cooper does. That's what he does. That's what he does.
All right, now those of you at home who want to know what our next challenger's name is, eyes open, if not, close them. And there it is.
It's a light brown in color, and Sir Mortimer is just having difficulty in making it stand up. Well, there it is. Now, this is what it is.
Well, now we come to our celebrity spot, and here, of course, we ask them to put on the masks, or blackouts, or whatever you like to call them. Would our celebrities sign in, please?
Good evening, Mr. Celebrity. Are you in show business?
The grandfather of the more interesting games, those which required some kind of logical progression of questioning, was undoubtedly What's My Line? Dennis Norden and I were on the panel for 6 months, about 80 years ago. The best clue we on the panel got was from the reaction of the studio audience when the guests signed in. After a few weeks, you could detect the difference between the excited "oh" when a famous film star walked in, the respectful and disappointed murmur when it was a politician, the yelp at somebody highly topical, and the delighted titter at some splendid trade, such as the famous Saga maker's bottom knocker. The other thing was that we all smoked like chimneys in those days, and when we had to put our masks on for the mystery guest, we couldn't remember where we parked our smouldering fag. But the revelation when looking at a 40-year-old show is quite how superb Eamon Andrews was. Totally professional and in command, but touching it all lightly and transparently keen for the contestant to beat the panel. Here's a full round of the granddaddy of them all, What's My Line?
Ferdinand Rosenthal, how are you?
Sir?
Thank you. Tell me, where do you come from?
London.
London, all right. Have you got a piece of mime ready for the experts?
Yes.
I think just a little bit further down, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Now, if you'll just sit down where you are, Mr. Rosenthal, that's fine. And in all cases here, the experts who have to guess what the occupation is will have to guess best way they can. We'll be starting off with Gilbert Harding, but we're going to show you at home, if you want to play it the easy way, what the occupation of Mr. Rosenthal is. If you don't want to know, close your eyes now. I'll tell you roughly when it's off the screen. All right, all clear. We start with Gilbert Harding, and we'll tell you that Mr. Rosenthal is wage earning.
Wage earning? You were using your hand, obviously in your mind, weren't you?
That's right, sir.
Were you hoping to make a sound with it?
No.
No, not a sound. No, that's one gone. Now we move on now to Barbara Kelly.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, lady.
Mr. Rosenthal, you look artistic, creative, and as though you might kiss a lady's hand when you met her. I hope to meet you afterwards.
There you are.
Very
Thank you.
gallant. And slightly dangerous, too. Is your job artistic in any way?
No.
No? Oh, there I am.
That's two gone. That excludes kissing ladies' hands. Isabel Bonnet.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, Sir
Good evening, lady.
Is it practical?
Yes.
Do you meet the general public?
I do.
Do you go to meet them?
I do.
Do you go to their houses?
Yes, sometimes.
And when you are there, you perform a useful service?
I do.
Yes. Something we could use?
Something you could make use of, yes.
Something we could
Yes.
make use of. Would we be very glad to see you when you came? I'm sure we would.
Ask Barbara Kelly.
Oh, well, Barbara, obviously, she's quite carried away. Is it anything to do with the structure of the house itself?
No.
Thank you. That's 3 gone. David Nixon.
Mr. Rosenthal, Barbara said that you looked as if you could be kissing a lady's hand. You looked as if you could be twisting it off to me. Were you twisting were you twisting something in your mind? Were you
Yes.
turning? You were turning something?
Yes, sir.
Is that something, Mr. Rosenthal, that you take with you when you do your job?
Yes,
The
sir.
thing you
Wait,
would turn?
wait, excuse me a minute. What you were actually twisting, you don't take with you on your job, do you?
He's twisting you, look out.
Yes.
Wait, now, let me just have a discussion. Just a minute now.
No.
No. Tell him that. No.
No, sir.
No, he doesn't take that. That's 4
Talk
gone.
you into it.
He doesn't take what he's...
He doesn't take the actual thing that he twists.
I want to come back to this twisting because, you see, I think that we're being led up the garden path here.
Correct.
Here we have Mr. Rosenthal with a delightful continental flavour who makes me think to begin with he's tuning in some musical instrument. He says, no, he isn't. He's not doing anything artistic, not doing anything improving at all. He's wage earning. The work which you do then is the work which you do an ordinary pedestrian job.
Yes, if you call it.
It is. And what about this twisting? Are you employed by a public authority?
Yes.
And are you testing water mains?
No.
No.
No, if he was, he shouldn't be. Barbara Kelly.
We did establish, Mr. Rosenthal, that you did work inside the house.
No, you didn't
No,
establish
we
that.
didn't, so
That's
it's
6
outside.
gone.
Yes.
I didn't say what the answer was. I just said you didn't establish it. Isabel Barnett.
Me.
And to a Kelly.
All right. Well, I don't think we'd better pursue that one, had we?
Billy Kelly.
But
Yes.
he can go to people's houses, he said. And he works for a public authority. Is it then one of the main services that go to people's houses?
Wait now. What? Oh, I better say yes. I should say
Well, you
recorded.
know, we have gas, electricity, and water.
But not-
They all peep in. No, I'm not asking. I'm asking of main services.
Now, wait now. You say these are the main services. Gas, electricity,
Water,
and we're
no.
giving you a little no. That's 7 gone.
So cruel tonight.
It looks like a big no from here. Well, let's get back to the garden path, Mr. Rosenthal, that Gilbert got such applause on. Now, you do your job outside. Can you do your job in a person's garden? Do you sometimes find yourself... Oh, it's paths. No, do you work in... do you ever find yourself doing the job in people's gardens?
No. Unless, well, there is one
What about
exception, but we
these?
can't mention
What
it.
about these general services? Gas, electricity, and goodness knows what. They are provided locally. When I said you work for a public authority, you did say yes. Now then, am I right? Now, help me here, my dear Chairman. Am I right in thinking that the public authority for which you work is not necessarily local and municipal?
Yes.
Yes.
It is a wider authority.
Yes.
You work, in fact, for the government.
Yes, sir.
You do. Now then, what government servants go around with these here twitches? I know exactly what you are. I know exactly what you are. You go round working instruments to find out who've not taken out television licenses. Am I right?
No, you're not right. No, he thought it was a very good thing, but you're not right. No, that's...
Oh, that
Now,
means
change the subject, Miss Kelly. We've got...
I better fast after all that. I'm going to assume it has nothing at all to do with television. Mr. Rosenthal, do you wear a uniform or any different clothing?
Yes, I do.
Do you have a specific route to travel every day? Do you?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to make a guess, because it's the only thing I can think of, anything to do with the postal service.
Now you've got to find what he is, and you've only got one to find out. You've only got one left, and you must try and find what he has to do.
Trying to get the money out of me when things are delivered COD. He's a neat... He's obviously not. Am I right in saying that what is on the card is not just postal?
No, you're not. We won't do that one. There we are. That's the best bit of bluff we've done on this side of the house yet. Got you right off, postman. Oh, wonderful. You've beaten the expert.
The Name's the Same was another rather good game. It was in the classic mould of determining by questioning what something was or what somebody did, but it had for the panel an added charm in that we had to guess, for instance, whether the nightclub double bass player standing in front of us was Julius Caesar. He was, and in fact I remember clearly.
Right now, before we do anything else, we're going to ask those who want to play the game at home to close their eyes, those who don't want to play the game to leave them open while we show you the famous name of our challenger. Now, just before we start and get on to the subject of your famous name, we'll just talk about you for a minute. What part of the country do you come from?
I come from Chiswick.
From Chiswick? And what sort of work do you do yourself?
Well, I'm a schoolmaster.
You're a schoolmaster. That's very interesting, and it might possibly be of some help, but I hope not. Right. We're ready to start, and now you are your famous self in answering the questions, and we begin with Frank Muir.
Good evening to you, sir. Are you a live-o?
No.
Dead-o?
I fear it.
Are you, in your dead-o capacity, are you found in history books?
Yes, indeed.
Over to you, Wendy Toy.
Are you, male?
Yes.
Have you been dead longer than 100 years?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Very
indeed.
good. Pass to you, Dennis.
Do you get a certain amount of chi-iking from your pupils on account of your name?
Definitely no.
No. Were you a famous politician?
No.
Were you, in the forces? I mean, were you a soldier or a
No.
sailor?
No.
Were you a famous artist?
No.
Frank?
Were you a soldier?
No.
Oh, I love this man. I don't need to do anything with a schoolmaster, you see. He's completely on his own here. That's 4, Frank.
You must have been something. Were you English?
Yes.
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 He was English, Wendy.
When your pupils heard your name for the first time, would it have covered them in gloom if you'd had to go on about it, if you know what I mean?
Yes, a sort of synthetic gloom.
Yes.
Don't give a thing away, not a thing.
Did you wear tighter trousers than looser ones, or frillier ones than straighter ones?
Well, the question of attire is a little difficult. I certainly was rather gaudily attired.
Gaudily?
To you.
Still not giving anything away.
Gaudily. You go rather far back in history, do you?
Oh, yes, but not too far back.
We don't.
You'd better try.
Did you invent or inaugurate anything?
No.
Very good.
Were you a bad boy? Were you, did you get into trouble?
Matter of opinion. I did appear before the beak on one occasion.
Oh, Sheila, you got a straight
Did you
answer?
blow something up?
No.
Frank?
Frank, 2 left.
There goes Guy. You say you were rather... Were you a writer?
Yes.
No, I think we must be fair about that and give them a good definite yes.
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 So we must
Yes.
be fair about that
Yes.
one.
Yes, I was, all right.
I'm going to plunge straight in for the good of the team as a whole.
Yeah.
You weren't Boswell, were you?
No.
You're well in the hole with that
Yes.
one.
I wish you were.
Matter of fact, you're out altogether. Wendy,
How many questions have I got,
you
Bernie?
have 2 left.
Were you alive in the 17th century?
Just.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't need as near an answer as
No,
that.
let's be honest.
No.
Elizabeth. We'll put
No.
it Elizabeth.
I was out of the scene by that time.
Were a lot of ladies in love with you?
I should think thousands.
I should have thought so, but yes,
All right,
indeed.
past you, Dennis. That's my last, anyway.
That is your last one, I'm afraid, Wendy. That's 2 out. Dennis and Sheila each have 2. Dennis.
Are you on or about the time of Shakespeare?
About the same time.
You're not being foxy on this. I take it if you're not Shakespeare, I'll say you are Shakespeare.
I thought you were going to win there, Mr. Shakespeare. Thank you very much for being with us. We're sorry we couldn't bring your celebrity along to meet you today.
I'm sorry about that.
Train service from Stratford isn't that good, you know?
No.
There were also panel games for children, and in these Eamon Andrews permitted himself a slight relaxation in his dress code. The bank manager's suit was replaced by a very slightly jaunty pullover. All these panel games were played for all their worth, and there was no letting up of the pressure, even when the players were children.
Now you're going to be handed something in the studio. Will you have a close look at it, take your time, and tell us what it is? And would you perhaps hold it up so as we can all see it?
Got a Sputnik going on. Can we break it open?
You may do. You may even eat it if you want to.
Oh. It tastes like lettuce. It's not lettuce. Horrible.
Well, I suppose you can't speak now, David, after that, so...
You have a taste. No, thank you.
Well, there are
Could
two...
it be, there's lettuce that hasn't grown. No, look, it's a lettuce that hasn't grown. We've got a taste. Chive.
Now, make your guess. There are 2 points for this.
Chive, could it be? Could it be a chive? Could it be a lettuce? It's not green.
Now, I'll have to pin you down to a guess now.
Oh, it could be one that hasn't grown. Felicity. No, I don't. It isn't.
What do you think it is?
Felicity thought it was a chive.
No.
We don't think it's that. So, could it be a lettuce that hasn't grown?
No, it's chicory.
They don't make children like that anymore, or programs of that speed. Not that speed is the right word. One of the slowest TV panel games ever was also one of the most popular panel games ever, Animal, Vegetable and Mineral. The programme now looks as if it was made in another century. Perhaps it was what 18th century television would have looked like. Mannered, polite, and in no hurry at all.
The color of this is white and sort of yellow, orange yellow. And this is what it is. Don't you think we ought to give this one to Daniel too? Or should we give this to Bushel?
Well, he can pass them on.
When I have him in this spot now, it seems to me the thing. We should start out with it.
They don't smell, although they're horrible little things. I think they're attached to sandals, though for what purpose I don't know.
Heels, you
Well,
mean?
of course, they may have been used in some kind of game, though I don't quite see what sort of game. Both worn on the sandals of players in an obscure game.
You mean like the pom-poms on the
That's
Greek
right.
sandals?
Yes, that's it.
Do you like that, Dr. Bushel?
Not much.
You'd be right, you know.
I don't know what they are.
horrible-looking things. It belongs to some sort of sophisticated people. I suppose it's one of these horrible folk things.
For all of us ethnographers, that's always difficult, isn't
Yes.
it?
Ritual objects used at Christmas.
Beats me.
Rick, you know them?
No, I don't think I know these chaps.
Like that?
No idea, Rick?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, let me have a look at them.
Somehow it seems to me that ought to be down your line.
Down my line. No, I think I'm going to give this one up. I don't know.
Well, I think that's probably wise at this point. Actually, you may be awfully surprised at this, but these are boxing gloves worn by fighting cocks.
Yes.
And they come from Lancashire and the last century. You see, these are put on when you're just training your cocks to fight, so they won't hurt themselves. But when you have the real business, the real fights, you have these things put on over the spurs, and then they're really dangerous. But these are to save the cock. I didn't know until this evening that you had cockfights in Great Britain.
I found a kind of charm and innocence in most of those old panel games, which couldn't last, of course. Game shows with big money prizes became extremely profitable to produce, and bingo. Here's a final reminder of what panel games used to be like, and a demonstration that when playing them, a wild, intuitive guess was often worth 20 logical questions.
Right, I think we have time for one more challenger now, so will the next one please sign in? Thank you very much. We sign by shaking hands. I'm getting confused with another program. However, we'll let that go for the moment. We'll let the viewers who want to see your name. Those who don't, close their eyes. Now, do you find this a funny name?
I don't.
You don't? Not in the least peculiar?
Not in the least.
No, that's fair enough. Well, we're going to start the questioning this time. We'll start with you, I think, Frank. We've gone the circuit.
Do that. Do that. Have you, sir, do be alive. Are you alive?
I am.
Oh, well done. Thank you.
Actually, I should question that.
Yes. Yes. Are you in this room now?
Yes,
Are you on this panel?
I am.
Are you me?
See, as soon as I questioned the fact of him being alive, he knew who it was, without a shadow of a doubt. Yes. How did you know? Just one of those things.
It was that clue, actually,
It
saying
was.
yes and no.
Well, I can understand you getting it from that clue, Frank. Nobody else would have. It couldn't have been anyone else in the panel, could it?
Would you like to meet me?
Yes. After the show, Frank. I'm sorry you didn't beat the panel.
So am I.
Great pity. However, they, after the way they lost the last two, they deserve to win one. I think we give them one more chance, and that, I think, leaves it even, doesn't it, at the moment? 3 and 2, yes. One more chance. Will our final challenger sign in? No, we haven't got time for one more challenger. It's a pity, a nice-looking one, too. One of the best-looking we've had tonight. Anyway, that's all we have time for right now. On behalf of our two panels, Peter Martin and myself, this is Bernard Braden saying thank you for watching and good night.
It's nice having the family together again after 35 years, isn't it?
Hey, where's the sexy one with the dark hair?
Just coming through the door, Dad.
Through the door?
Hello!
Oh, ain't seen you since 1955. You're still sitting around the same table drinking the same old horrible tea. Don't you ever go out?
Yeah, I see the old Betty's still going strong, eh?
Not for long, though. Apparently they're going to recreate us using soap stars from EastEnders and Brookside and Coronation Street.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm buggered if I'm having anything to do with it. I'm off to watch BBC One. Help yourselves to more tea.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Bob, come here. Now, Leslie Grantham's playing you, so be nice to him, won't you?
Oh, yeah, Sue Johnson's playing you.
No, they decided not to because she hasn't got the class, you see.
No, well, apparently she's a very good actress, as happens.
Oh, no. I mean, they wouldn't replace me, would they? I mean, I'm a household name, after all.
Not like Harpic.
You know, those of us who've been in television since the beginning realize that nothing succeeds like a series or a serial. I almost said nothing succeeds like excess. In fact, the DG sometimes says, jokingly of course, that if one televised a few pages of the London telephone directory regularly for 5 or 6 weeks, one would gain an average audience of over 10 million.
I do feel silly just sitting here being waited on.
Now, you just sit marked down, Mum. We'll do all the work. Any more bacon pie?
No, there isn't. And would you take these plates into the kitchen and start washing up?
Oh, well, never mind. I'll save you some marmalade.
No, you won't. You'll take the marmalade into the kitchen and help Lady wash up.
Only got like that.
My plan, in a nutshell, is to put on every evening at a peak viewing hour a program that will, well, that will mirror the lives of an ordinary, happily married husband and wife. We show their ups and downs, their, well, the fun they get out of life, the minor tragedies that inevitably creep into their lives, their hobbies, what they're talking about, thinking, reading, and so on, so on, and so on.
A sort of Mrs. Dale's diary, in fact.
The Grove family began in April 1954. It was cheap, a mere 400 guineas per episode. It was live, only 2 episodes were ever recorded, and it was the first ever family serial on British television.
The first title, they called it The Welcomes. And I remember looking and saying, the last thing I want to produce is anything called The Welcomes, you know. And we were just moving into here. I'd already produced things here. And I said, why not, we're in Lime Grove, call it The Groves.
In many ways, The Groves was the first soap opera on British television. It was obviously drawing on the Archers and the Dales, to some extent from radio. But it was clearly the first time that the nation had been gripped by the ongoing story of a television family. So if that's a definition of a soap, then yes, it was the first soap.
Oh, you know, we're very lucky, Bob. Despite all that's happened, we're still a very happy family.
Yeah, and we're all going on holiday, and we're all looking forward to it.
But I'm worried about
The part I played in The Groves was that of a builder called Mr. Grove. And I think he lived in Clapham and had a slight Clapham accent.
You know, Grove's not the man he was. And I'm sure Gladys is going to overwork on this holiday.
Oh, now, Gran, you just stop worrying. There's Jack, Lenny, Daphne, Jane, and myself to do all the work.
I played Pat, who was the elder daughter, and she was kind of attractive, happy, sort of nice girl next door, if you like.
Why are they called both she? Oh, I just said it. Beauty. Well, girls aren't beautiful. You stay thinking that, lad, and you won't come to any mischief.
I played a part called Jack. He was a bit of a lad, really, Jack Grove. I seem to have endless girlfriends in the series, as far as I can remember, and that really was my role, was the kind of various love affairs that I had.
You know, Jack, the more I think of you, the more I think boat shouldn't be called she.
What does that cryptic statement mean?
Well, I mean, look at all the trouble women have caused you.
I like your flipping cheek.
The character I played with Lenny, that's the youngest of the 4 children. Nothing exceptional, just a young, boisterous, typical child of that period.
There's a beauty now, Dad.
Oh, yes, dear. A mere 6,000 next work.
Oh, ridiculous. No car could be worth that much.
Oh, yes, it could. There was a Maharaj who had rubies instead of reflectors.
Pipe down, Lenny.
Of course. If you were prepared to buy one on hire purchase.
Well, I'm not. When I take the family out for a drive in a car that belongs to me, not to a row of offices in the city. Well, they are, Jack. 1939, a snip.
You've got to be careful of these pre-war jobs, Dad. You can be buying a packet of trouble.
Quite right. That's Grove all over. Spoil the ship right at the top. Why don't you have a new car and be done with it?
Because I've got £100, Grandma. Of course, if you would fork out those sovereigns that you've got hidden under the bed.
Oh, no, you don't. Those sovereigns are there for an emergency, not for riotous living.
Well, then let me pick my own car.
Certainly. But don't expect me to come in it if it is respectable.
The world the Groves live in is very safe, it's very secure, it's fairly smug, it's very cosy. People get on, there's the occasional nosy neighbour, but nothing really disrupts the social fabric. Policemen are always nice, everyone has a job, nice girls go out with boys but don't go too far. Everybody is part of this nice, safe, secure, cosy unit.
There's nothing really better than what you're used to, is there?
I see those bank clerks, middle class I call them, £15 a week, all worry. No, I don't think that life would suit me.
Well, what's your idea of life?
Of life? I'd like to build my life around my pleasures.
2 grams, run Tennessee. He died, unfortunately. He went to Guernsey because of tax things and died. It was most unhappy.
Yes, Michael's just gone.
Michael died, not just gone.
Michael and Roland.
Oh, I didn't know there were any of these around.
This is turning the clock back, isn't it?
Oh,
yes.
dear. Now, Mr. Grove, you employ a number of men from time to time, and I take it that their pay packets are about.
Yes, they are. I'd forgotten about that.
Yes, and don't forget Gran's nest egg, Dad. My grandma keeps a tidy sum parked under her bed.
Oh, does she? Well, why doesn't she deposit it with a bank? Or set a simple wall safe, like this.
Trouble is, she's a very obstinate old party.
Well, there you are, you see, money under the bed, that's a very substantial inducement.
Yes.
The episode we saw, I thought, was rather dull, because it seemed to me to be a documentary. Actually, it was done, I think, in collaboration with the police, and it was all about locks and burglar proofing and this kind of thing, which was very tedious, although I suppose was good advice for the householder, but I found it dead bore.
They've obviously taken quite a lot from the Archers, because there's quite a lot of teaching material comes through. For instance, one I saw about the burglary, and that's telling people how to protect their houses and what you must do. You can see that teaching element coming through from the Archers.
You know, you can make a valid will on the back of an envelope.
Sailing's a wonderful sport, provided you know something about it.
Accidents will happen, and nearly always do if you play with fire.
Soap operas have always dealt with social issues in one way or another. The Groves did it in a very, very crude way. Lock your house securely. Don't go sailing unless you know how to use a boat. Look after your elderly neighbour if she needs some money and she's down on her luck. It was very blatant, it was very didactic, it was very here is this week moral.
Yes.
Oh, darling, what can he want?
Did you remember to take out the TV license?
But Simon, darling, I thought that you...
But Angel, I thought that you... Will you come this way, please?
Have we got a license?
Of course we have.
I've never seen it.
There's no reason why you should. It's nothing to look at.
Well, how do you know? Have you seen it?
Well, no. But Bob always takes care of that kind of thing.
Oh, I hope he does, because they'll be down on him like a ton of hot bricks if he hasn't.
I never know how they find out.
Those vans, they've only got to pass down the street and they know at once whether you've got a license or not.
How?
Well, it's full of wires and special machinery.
I understand how they can detect a set, but surely they can't tell whether you have a license or not.
That's what you think, but I know better. Miss Jones told me they can tell in a flash whether you have a license or not. If you haven't, in they come, rip the set off the wall and burn it before your very eyes.
Nonsense, Gran.
You can imagine people kind of rushing for the sideboard after the episode finished to see if they knew where their licence was.
I've been telling Dad about this lecture series I'm attending.
I can't imagine where it is.
At the Polytechnic. There's a lot more in modern decoration than you'd imagine.
I mean the licence.
You don't need a licence to attend lectures, Mum.
What lectures?
I was just telling you.
Oh, one thing at a time, please. I'm talking about the television licence.
Why?
Because the detector man's on the prowl outside.
Do you know where it is, Dad? I mean, we always keep that sort of thing in there.
Well, let me see.
I've met some jolly nice people at the Poly. Clever, too. There's a girl named Beryl.
Oh, never mind Beryl, dear. Let your father think.
All right, if you can't be bothered to listen.
Dad, you won't find it on the ceiling.
It was the lower middle class in the early days of post-war television who owned the sets. So this was going to be our public and looking at themselves.
When the Groves first start, it's a certain kind of status symbol, in a way, to have TV. You were kind of one up on your neighbours if you had TV, or one down on your neighbours if they were kind of snobbish people who didn't approve of TV, like satellite dishes now. So the Groves is being watched by people like the Groves, people who live that kind of lifestyle, people who have that kind of decor and who have arguments about the television set, as the Groves do in lots of episodes.
Well, now it's on. Either leave the room or keep quiet and don't ask any silly questions.
Did Dad say what time he'd be back?
He said he might be late.
Oh, good. Can we stay up till he comes?
We'll see. Now remember, if anybody talks, I shall have something to say.
Gran was an enormous national figure. I think one of the things was that they absolutely adored her irascible temper. And she sort of sat there all hunched up in a shawl, being tremendously bad-tempered, but really good at heart. You know, everyone adored her. So she was very, very popular. I think also there'd been that sort of music hall mother-in-law type joke had come right down, and in a way she was that as well, I think. And phrases like, I'm fain for lack of nourishment, you know, all that, but was very popular and people would always pick up on it.
Am I to be left here to perish?
I don't think there's much danger of that, Gran.
My bottle's cold and I want me 11s.
It's nowhere near 11 yet.
My stomach isn't a clock and I'm faint for lack of nourishment.
Kettle's on, it won't be long. Are you all right otherwise?
I'm cold hungry and neglected, and she asked me if I'm all right.
Gran became the biggest star. Rather like Ina Sharples in Coronation Street, I feel, because she was a cantankerous old so-and-so with a heart of gold and all that. But she became the one that people asked me about. Whenever I met people, they would always say, how's Gran? How's she getting on? You see, she was very popular. Yes, I would say that she became really the biggest star. Mm.
We were very much in the public eye because it was only us. There was no commercial television at the time. And everywhere we went, we were recognized. And that was very pleasant in a way. You know, we got the traditional seats in restaurants when others couldn't and all of that, and it was very, very pleasant.
Television was still much newer. So anything being, the idea of an ordinary family being taken into your home was very exciting. Be able to see people like you yourself, like your friends. So I think that made a big impact. And also, I think that they were talking about things that people themselves were talking. I mean, all that's the same.
When the Groves first started, it attracted around 4 million viewers, and by the time it finished, it was attracting 11 million viewers, which in the mid-50s is a very large figure. The only programmes that beat it were What's My Line and Ask Pickles with Wilfred Pickles, which were two kind of game panel show type things. So in terms of drama, it was the most popular programme on British TV.
We met the Queen Mum, of course, which was delightful. She was lovely. She was very friendly, and I had the privilege of standing next to her, and she said to me one moment, she said, it's good, isn't it? I wasn't quite sure what she meant. I said, what, Mum? She said, the Grove family, the success of the Grove family. I watch it all the time, she said. I watch it all the time.
The impact of the Groves can be measured, if you like, by looking at what happened on the first night of ITV, when one of the first ads shown on commercial TV in 1955 is Ruth Dunning, Mrs. Grove, Mum Grove, advertising Persil, which is a kind of a testament to how much she'd become the nation's favourite housewife.
Hello, I'm Ruth Dunning, and I'm very proud to have been invited to take part in this first evening of ITA television. It's a big night for all of us, and we do hope you're enjoying yourself. Now, you'll be seeing quite a bit of me in the future in some of the TV advertisements for Persil, interviewing some interesting people.
What absolutely struck me about the episodes I saw was that it's all about consumerism. It's all about teaching the family how to consume.
I've always hankered after a fitted carpet.
I suppose this was the first generation of ordinary people, working people, you know, who really were thinking about having fitted carpets and not only a wireless but a television, holidays, you know, all these things perhaps the majority of people didn't really have before the war, or they were very much seen as luxuries.
What kind of parties are you invited to? This kind of thing? If you find this normal, you belong to the upper middle class or higher. Or is this your kind of party? Could you join in without having to make an effort? If so, you probably belong somewhere in the middle classes. Or is this where you feel you rarely belong? Where you could relax most easily, without formality or ceremony of any kind? If so, your background is probably working class.
The world of the Groves is, in class terms, it's rather indeterminate, it's rather vague. I suppose it had to be so that everybody could identify with it, or a large range of people could identify with it. So I suppose it's, if you were going to put a label on it, you'd say it was kind of lower middle class in a way. But it isn't pinpointed terribly clearly. And in fact, different members of the family seem to be in different class groupings, really.
Peter Brandt gradually eased himself out of the lower middle class into rather a posher sort of image, because I think he wanted that.
I say, do you realise you're hurting everyone up? I can't help it, the trailer's jammed. Well, I'm trying to go on holiday. Where do you think I'm trying to go? Pictures? What? Button and puppy.
And when Carol came in, she also talked posh, and there was no sort of northern accent or Cockney accent or anything, which I believe, really, when they started, Peter talked a bit Cockney, but he got rid of that because he didn't want it. And I think it's perfectly acceptable that the next generation, even if the parents are accented, probably the next generation are a bit posher.
Mum, you liked the look of Ronald, didn't you?
Well, it looks all right.
Well, that doesn't sound very certain.
Well, I've never been one for looks myself. I like people for what they are. And I'm not quite sure what that young man is.
Well, he's a jolly good actor, anyway.
Too good, maybe.
What do you mean?
He's acting very interested in you. Why?
Why not? What's wrong with me?
Well, nothing, dear. But you're not his class, are you?
Oh, Mum, I never thought you were a snob.
Well, I don't object to him, but how's his mother going to take to you?
They weren't challenging anything. They weren't offering any different ways of living, any different lifestyle options, if you like. It was very much an attempt to say, this is how the lower middle class family is today. And they were trying to teach people how to make the best of things. It's very much about keeping in your place, keeping in your class.
See that the script stresses the solidarity of the home. Peaceful, happy atmosphere of marital bliss. It's very important.
It's absolutely taken for granted that Mr. Groves is a sort of paternalistic character who's out working, and he's an authority figure, and Mrs. Groves is in the house. She's completely sunk in domesticity. And that's just seen as normal, you know, that there could never be any other way of doing things.
I enjoy my housework. I wouldn't want to give it up if Bob was twice as well off as he is now. Good gracious, what would I do all day? Twiddle my thumbs?
If a girl is to appear attractive and desirable, a major part of what she earns must go on clothes, cosmetics, hairdos, and of course those capricious nylons. A man can get by for years on one respectable and carefully used blue suit, but how many girls can be satisfied with one dress?
Yeah, well, I think it is a man's world myself, because, I mean, he goes to the dart match on Wednesday, Friday he goes over to Cornwallis, Saturday morning over to Cornwallis, and then again Sunday, and Sunday morning, Sunday night.
And what do you do?
Oh, I just, I could go over there, but, you know, it don't really appeal to me, drinking sort of thing. I sort of stay with the children and get them bathed and ready for the next day.
And are you content with that?
Well, not really, but I mean, you can't do much else about it, sort of.
Mum, do you know what?
I expect so, dear. What?
I've just been chased down the road by the most enormous great wolf.
Oh, that was fun. Now wash your hands.
British and European societies were very frightened of American popular culture after the war. They thought it would sort of damage youth. You know, there'd be rock and roll and Elvis Presley, all this. You don't see any of that in the Groves, and the children are kind of these sort of Boy Scout types.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, Dad, I've worked out a sort of rota system for cooking and bed making, things like that.
You have?
Yes. All Mum will have to do is dress herself.
Well, where is this rota?
Here you are. First day. Shopping, Daphne. Cooking, Pat. Washing up, Rodney. Bed making, Dad.
Proper thing too.
Dusting and scrubbing, Jack.
Hey, steady on.
Coordinating, Lenny. Second day. Well, you see, I'll switch things around a bit, but it works very well,
Let's
Dad.
have a look at this. Second day, coordinating Lenny. Third day, coordinating Lenny. Fourth day, coordinating Lenny. Did you do anything else but coordinate?
No, well, you see, I always think it's better to have the same man doing all the arrangements, otherwise they all go to pot.
Yeah, well, you better coordinate yourself up to bed.
One function of the soap must have been to reassure middle-aged people. You know, here's a very reassuring picture of your children. They're not getting into trouble. They haven't become teddy boys. The girl isn't pregnant and so on. Whereas, in fact, there was more and more worry about teenagers and particularly juvenile crime.
Oh, come on! Rubbish!
Of course you will. Come over here, I'll help you.
One of the more amusing aspects of the Groves in the mid-50s was an ongoing debate in the press about the size of the younger members of the household. They were growing up. They were getting too big for their roles. So there was a debate, should they phase out the kids? Should they get rid of the kids, bump them off or pack them off somewhere else and write them out of the series? Or should they take the hitherto unusual step of letting them grow up within the series? This manifests itself in the popular press becoming unnaturally interested in Christopher Beanie's trousers, for example.
There was a very strong debate, obviously, about whether we should allow the children to age in this series, you know, or whether we should replace them with other younger children somehow. And there was a conference which concerned the Pertwees, myself, and Cecil McGiven at the time, obviously because he was controller of programmes. And between us, we decided, let them age. But then we were faced without any younger child. So we brought in this other cousin called Rodney, to represent the younger type in the family again.
Laura, have you read episode 68?
No, why?
Well, they've introduced a blasted kid. Cousin or a nephew or something come on a visit.
Oh, it's not so bad.
Not so bad. He's got all the best lines and the fade-out. Good grief.
No one.
It's quite a visit. He's in 69 and 70 as well.
Uncle,
Yes?
can I take my football to play with on the beach?
Yes, if you like.
You know, this holiday will be a disaster.
All right, old Moore, so it's going to be a disaster.
It's a shame. Gladys works for us all the year round, particularly for me. And then when holiday time comes round, she has to have all this worry.
What worry?
Well, those two boys will drown themselves.
Listen, Gran, just because your Uncle George fell off the Wallasey ferry, it doesn't mean that our boys are going to fall out of their own boat.
The Groves ran out of steam because it was too reliant on one family and on one set. If you think of the successful long-running soaps, they have various meeting points. Coronation Street has a pub, EastEnders has the pub and the market outside the pub and the laundrettes and various shops. Lots of points of intersection between different characters. The Groves had the Groves and nothing but the Groves, and it became fairly obvious that the Groves would have to go.
I think sooner or later the public wants a change, or the powers that be want change. And of course, we all got really rather fed up with it in the end. I mean, the actors, though we were delighted to be employed, wished that we could be employed on something else, because it became a bit tedious after 3 years, you know, day in, day out. And I think everything has to change sooner or later.
Off we go, then.
Oh, Bob. Oh, I do hope everything keeps safe while we're away.
And now, before the next program, a chance to see one of our new logos. This is an advanced logo that actually moves, as you can see. That is one of the benefits of having visual television. It represents a single eye surrounded by bat wings, and is an extremely enjoyable way to pass the time before the next program.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, puffers everywhere. You're here for the final of the All England Smoke Ring Blowing Contest. The tars are ready. The contestants are climbing into position. They'll be there any moment. And there they go. There they go. Puff, puff, puff. What a marvellous sight that is.
Hi there. Later on this evening, you can see the most famous Lime Grove film, The 39 Steps. And, sorry, I should have paused there. Then the main documentary, The Lime Grove Story, introduced by Ludovic Kennedy, the one who didn't become president. But first, let's meet a real TV legend, Julie's brother, Eamonn Andrews, with another fascinating This Is Your Life. Absolutely marvellous. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Again, for the 6th year, This Is Your Life. In 30 minutes, the highlights of a lifetime, past moments of happiness, of adventure, of dangers faced, or duty done. Sir or madam, whoever you are, wherever you are, today is your day, tonight's your night. This is your life.
General, how about themselves?
Good evening. Welcome to This Is Your Life. This is Alex McIntosh in Studio P for Peter at Lime Grove. We must be on tonight, Eamonn Andrews is in Lime Grove Studio H.
Well, we're in a rainy square, Vincent Square off Victoria, waiting for our guest to arrive. He should be coming behind me very shortly. Here we are, as you may have recognized, at the gates of Pinewood Studios.
Well, tonight certainly is a night. Because in this jam-packed Savoy Hotel restaurant, the whole of theatrical London seems to have crowded in. Somewhere among them, I can't quite see him at the moment, is Eamonn Andrews.
But your heart is crammed with arrogancy, spleen and pride.
Well, now, do you recognize that voice that has held audiences spellbound for over 60 years? I'm sure you do, but let's move on further.
Well, in less than a minute from now, through the apparently dead studio, will walk the man that Eamonn Andrews is hoping to meet. This man is on his way from a film viewing room to the BBC Club. And that's the usual route for privileged people at this time of the evening. But he'll have no idea that 2 of the cameras are still live.
There's television's Jack Hedley from the world of Tim Fraser, glamorous and vivacious Moira Lister. And there's Muriel Pavlo with her husband Derek Farr. And over there, I think I can see, yes, it's Dame Sybil Thorndike, obviously enjoying herself.
We're waiting for one particular car. Who's inside it? Well, I'm not going to say, and I can only hope that the person we're waiting for is inside it. Yes, that's the car.
Well, this is where I shut up, I think, because I think they've arrived.
Yeah, indeed.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you know Alan?
Hello, Alan. Yes, of course I do. How are you?
What, do you know Mr. Todd?
Hello. He's going to go around the wrong way. It's unfortunate. It's over here, the message. Right over this way. Yes.
Appeal unto the Pope to bring my whole cause before His Holiness and to be judged by him.
Dame Sybil, that was wonderful. How are you?
Hello.
But beyond saying to you it was wonderful, at the request of your multitudes of admirers, I want to tell you that tonight, Dame Sybil Thorndike, this is your life.
Crikey.
Wait a minute, I'm forgetting something. Yes, I am, because you're not going to see it for a moment, Kenny, because tonight, Kenneth Moore... Tonight, this is your life, Harry Seacombe. Now, if this seems to be an intrusion, we hope you'll forgive us. For tonight, Dame Edith Louisa Sitwell, poet, writer, descendant of Robert the Bruce, the Red Rose Plantagenets and Macbeth, this is your life. Some of these cameras are, strangely enough, live, and thank you, Cliff and Alan, because tonight gave us time tonight to say, Richard Todd, actor and soldier of distinction, tonight, this is your life.
This isn't serious.
It's very serious. Yes, John Mills, CBE, one of the most distinguished actors of our time. Tonight, this is your life, and there's the camera watching you. Tonight, this is your life, Dickie Attenborough. We're going to go back to the theater if you don't mind. You're right, Richard, for some fast movement? Come on, never mind. Think about it later. Come on. Will you come with me? All right? Come on. May we borrow your car and drive into the theater?
Yes, please. I'll go home in Betsy.
All right, let's away to the theater.
See you tomorrow, John.
Right, well, Good night. Thank you.
All right, well. Did you know about this? No, I did not think it.
Come and join
And now they've made that journey back here from Pinewood Studios, where the opening for tonight's program was, of course, recorded just about 1 hour ago. And here is Eamon Andrews with his guest for tonight, international star and Oscar winner, John Mills.
And I won't tell you what he's been saying on the way down either. Over this side, Richard. I wouldn't like to tell you what he was saying on the way round here to the theater. Well, I wouldn't like to tell you what he was saying to me on the way around here from the theater, but Kenneth Moore, this is your life.
You will have to be...
What would he have to be?
Better than this, you know, Mills. These figures are terrible.
It's bedtime, Kenny.
I'd be very much surprised if you didn't remember me, young Richard.
And when I went with him second time round, I was scared stiff.
I say, what a lovely party.
And I must say, Attenborough, you appear to be smoking that pipe with great conviction.
Well, if that's an order, sir, I'll have to send you an officer, I suppose. I'll be sending you Sweeney.
For God's sake, Dickie, stop sticking your tongue out like that. You look like a cobra.
Johnny, through Titania's bower and don't thump, dear boy. You're supposed to be an elf.
My dear fellow, that isn't really necessary, you know.
I think the first thing I ever said to you was something to do with the cheese ration. I know who that is.
Good man.
And then at last we got to know the tribe sufficiently well to be let into the secrets of their ritual. Old Mikani began to tell me about them. But, Dick, if you think I'm still in the heart of Australia, you're in for a surprise. Look behind you.
Yes, from Woking, your old nurse, Nanny Gething. Well, you do remember because you keep in touch. Haven't met for 10 years. That, I might add, is Harry on the right. Who is it on the left, Harry?
My brother.
Your elder brother Fred, who's now rector of Markham, Monmouthshire.
Black sheep of the family.
The newsreel cameraman who took the film we've just been watching, come in. Douglas Hardy, OBE.
Tame cameraman. How bless your heart. I thought you were dead.
The eminent director who produced you in Midsummer Night's Dream in '37, Dr. Tyrone Guthrie. And here from Genevieve is your leading lady, the one and only Kay Kendall.
Oh, no. You are wonderful, darling. How are you?
I'm absolutely fine.
Mad as ever.
Yes, the voice, or rather the scream of someone who came into your life with a bang. You remember? She was then Lady Boyle, and people know her better as Katie Boyle.
I know an actor who absolutely hates Kenny. Couldn't bear him. I mean, he adored me. I mean, we were great friends, but he just refused to speak to Kenny from the beginning.
Well, now, this is your life. We'll never balk at
sorry.
the embarrassing moment. So let's meet this talented, if somewhat taciturn actor, may we? I don't think they're going to say anything, so perhaps, Kay, you'd take her over to join his other friends, what? Thank you, Kay Kendall, very much. Thank you.
You remember the day we got drunk?
It's an exaggeration, I'm sure.
Well, it was a tiny exaggeration.
I don't think there was a day we didn't.
Yes, you do. Well, one day, do you remember the day when we were very cold on Westminster Bridge?
I do.
We were absolutely freezing, and it was 9:30, and there was a pub. So we went and banged on the door, and we said, we're very, very cold. Could we have something to warm us up? So the man gave us 4 rums with lemon and hot water. Didn't he?
I remember that, it's true.
And then we went out and shot the whole scene wrong.
It was a play called Men in Shadow. I produced it in London, played the leading part, and I went to Cambridge. Dickie was in the RAF and produced him in my part.
But was he right for the part?
No. I don't think he was, really. I don't think he could have been less right, actually. You see, the part was supposed to be a man of about 30, with a rather weather-beaten face. And at the time, Dickie looked like a very jolly Dutch cheese.
The first time we met was during the rehearsals of a play called Happy Weekend.
That's right. That's right.
Johnny worked so terribly hard at that part, but he was hopelessly miscast.
Yes, I was removed, I think.
As a matter of fact, you did get this out.
Yes, I did get this.
I used to have him down in the office to talk to him and try and give him some advice, but I'm afraid it was not much use.
So what did you do?
Well, I gave him the set.
And tell me, what was it that he found so difficult to sell?
Well, it's what we call in the trade toilet requisites.
Yes, but what sort?
Well, you tell him, Johnny.
Well, it was, yes, it was paper.
In those days, Eamon, Harry and Spike Milligan and Michael Bentine and Peter Sellers used to spend a lot of time down at my place talking over several ideas for a radio show, featuring a new kind of crazy goon humor, mainly invented by Spike Milligan. And I was christened Cogboss, which means keeper of goons and voice of sanity.
À ce moment-là, la deuxième vague d'avions arrive et ce fut le grand coup. On entendait les avions passer boum, 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 et tout à coup, à se plonger et me relever. Lorsque le bombardement fut terminé, l'aviation fit un tour de reconnaissance et à ce moment-là, tout était bien rangé, le bon travail était fait. Au nom des ouvriers de l'Arsenal, je vous remercie.
Thank you.
Personne n'a été tué. Personne n'a ici non plus.
Well, I remember this very well because it was a terrifying moment. We were all absolutely like this. And because our anti-aircraft armament had been knocked out and we couldn't shoot back. And then he said to me, shove up a bit. So I shoved up a bit. And where my head would have been, his head was. And the piece of shrapnel that came through the ship's side took a lump out of his head instead of mine. And when I looked round, he was all covered in blood. And I said, well, you are a bloody fool. That should have been me.
They was all frightened to death, but as soon as Lieutenant Todd went with them, they was okay, and they went straight through the course.
And what was his reputation with the man?
He was liked by everybody because he was such a sociable gentleman. And every time we saw him, he was riding round the island on his pony, finding something else to do the next day.
All right, thank you very much, Tommy.
It's been great to meet you, sir.
Nice to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
The director, Lee Thompson, asked me if I'd like to do a screen test.
Did your father help you?
Oh, yes. He told me all about the girl I had to play, the way she ate, the way she moved. We had a whole background mapped out. She became as real to me as the people in the stories you used to tell me about when I was little.
And when you were sent your script, did he go over it with you?
Oh, yes, he always used to help me learn my lines.
She helped me too.
And when you got to the studio, how did you feel, Lady?
Oh, I was terribly nervous. But Daddy always used to make me laugh. It was marvelous having him there.
This is where, Bill, your wife should join us, but she knew you'd be much more pleased if she stayed with your daughter, Sarah, who, as you know, is too young to be allowed to appear, but as a special treat, is sitting up to watch the program.
Well, that's rather nice.
It is. We were hoping to have a message from her, but we don't seem to have it. Listen carefully. Hello? We're getting no sound. Oh, shame.
Are you, Daddy?
That's her, all right, but we can't... Look.
Oh, no.
Hello, Kenny.
Hello. Can they hear me?
Yes, they can. She'll be on this monitor.
Hello, darling.
Hello, Kenny.
Hello. It's long past both your bedtimes.
Say good night to Daddy, darling. Good night, Daddy.
Good night.
Hello, Richard. It is nice to see you again after all these years. My God, I don't quite know whether to call you Richard, Sweeney, or Dick. But whatever it is, it's a very great pleasure to see you. Little did I think, years ago, in 1943, 17 years have elapsed, that the next time we would meet would be over the television.
Dick, I don't suppose you realized when you went to the Mousetrap party that you were going to be on this program tonight.
Well, I knew all the time, see, as well.
Dick, I've been asked to perhaps try to remember something that won't be too embarrassing to you. And the last time we worked together was on the Doc Brief. And anyway, Dick used to suddenly appear like a penguin. He'd be standing around and I'd sort of catch him out the corner of my eye. He was playing the character Fowl. And somehow fits in. He sort of would go... That, for my next impersonation, I would like to do a man who has got microphone cable wound round his legs.
Well, I thought I was going to make the break of my life on film. And as I got into the aircraft, the property master handed me, first of all, an oxygen mask, which took care of the bottom half of my face. Then he handed me a helmet, which took care of my, what I thought, rather attractive ears. Then he handed me a pair of goggles, which took care of my eyes. And there was nothing left except a tiny spot on my forehead. And at the premiere, my agent picked this out, and I said, "What have they done to me, Harry? We're ruined." He said, "Yes, but you had a lovely forehead." He said, "It was a good thought."
Action. Cut. Mr. Moore.
will you please put the mask and the goggles back on your face? If you'll remember, Kenneth, you told me that I gave you your first job in a film as a rear gunner, and you wore a mask and goggles. We couldn't afford a whole airplane for you, so you just sat in the back portion. And I think you bombed Cologne. Nobody was hurt.
So what can I add to the already secret and murky life of Richard Samuel Attenborough? Explain your nickname? Well, you are a bunter, of course, one of the great chocolate eaters of our time. Has anybody mentioned the fact that you're a frustrated conductor? Or that you make parking spaces open up in front of you like the Red Sea when the rest of London is jammed solid? Or that your gramophone formed part of the original equipment for Desert Island Discs? That you take 4 years to read a book, and that you continue to support Chelsea when your every instinct must tell you that West Ham is the team? Or that you take, your idea of dieting is to take saccharin in your coffee after a 7-course dinner?
Good evening, Richard. Sorry I can't be in London to join with your many friends on this occasion. Eamon, I'd like to tell you a few things about Dick. There was one particular stunt, a very dangerous leap about 20 feet across the chasm in Rob Roy. We held that to the last shot in the picture. But Dick did it.
Hello, Daddy. I wish I could have been there with you tonight. We always enjoy being in on everything together, don't we? Through you, the theater has always had a special magic for me. And I can remember standing in the wings at a very early age and feeling so proud. And I always loved doing things with you, whether it's haymaking at the farm or going to the movies or just talking silly scandal.
No, Bunter, those are all on the credit side, really, because you're a fantastic character. A little short, perhaps, compared to some of us, but 10 feet tall in other directions.
Bless you, darlings.
God bless you. Timber!
Well, there, ladies and gentlemen, we end our story of Kenneth Moore, idol of millions, and obviously friend of a non-talking dog. Kenneth Moore, this is your life. Thank you. Thank you. Well, there's quite obvious, Richard, that the parachute men of the British Army are as proud of you as you are of them. And here's the band of the 1st Parachute Regiment to say so. Richard Todd, this is your life. John Mills, CBE, this is your life. Thank you. In this season of carols, all that's left for me to say, with your good friends behind you, is Richard Attenborough, film star and governor of Clubland. This is your life. So we come to the end of our program. There are many other things we could say, but as we told you before Harry came into the theater, he's off to Central Africa tomorrow, and we know it would be impossible to send a man of distinction like Harry anywhere without a proper escort. We have that escort. Come in, Spike Milligan. Very much a part of your life, and it's all here in the book, because Harry Seacombe, this is your life.
Oh, thank you.
For those of you who enjoyed that program, the BBC is showing a series of old This Is Your Lives on Sunday evening at 6 o'clock.
Be it known that at the end of September, Her Majesty's Privy Council made known the number of licenses issued and authorized for the use and enjoyment of these our entertainments amounted unto... I beg your forgiveness, I must consult my scroll. Amounted unto 112,000. May we bring it to your remembrance that Her Majesty's Privy Council do will and command that you must have a license for the enjoyment of these entertainments. The money should be made payable in pennies, groats, Henry or Philip and Mary shillings, or any other coin current in the realm, to your Chief Justice, your Constable, or Head Borough. If you do fail to pay this sum, being duly apprehended, you shall suffer a fine of 2 ducats. But if any be convicted of the said offence a second time, they are immediately adjudged to be grievously whipped as a manifestation of their wickedness and as due punishment for the same.
And now Ploughman 5's coming into it, a late starter, but he's pulling up well. And Ploughman 2 and 3 are neck and neck as they come to the water jump. Well, we'll see where they are in 2 hours' time when Ludovic Kennedy looks at the birth of professional TV journalism at Lime Grove Studios.
Complaining about the ploughing. It's hopeless. It's complete and utter rubbish.
I know, but a lot of people like them.
My place or your place?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Dick's the Dog Green next.
Oh, is it? That's good. I like that, yeah.
My mum's favourite.
Is it? My mum's favourite and all, yeah. But my auntie Fanny, she prefers that other bloke in it.
Who's that?
That Brian Bless This House. She reckons he's very good.
Does he say evening all?
No, he doesn't. He says nothing at all. But he looks very good on it.
I'm going for a swim now.
Yeah, okay. See you around by the seaweed then.
Well.
Ta-da.
Of Pinewood Studios.
No, Eamon, love.
Inside the
Eamon, it's the Lime Grove story, love. This is... Can someone tell him he's outside the wrong sign?
And most of the people have gone home.
Bernard, get down there and tell him.
With black
Will somebody
and
tell him?
shiny limousines.
Maureen, get me some tea, would you? This is no good. Eamon! He can't hear me, can he?
This corridor is in the...
That's right, you're in the right building now, Eamon. Lime Grove Studios, yes.
Now, when was the idea
Now come
born?
forward into the light, Eamon.
Perhaps the answer lies
Find your
in
light, love.
variety.
Oh,
Perhaps
this
you've
is
just
hopeless.
seen it in the news.
Mention the programmes,
No,
love,
we
that's it.
didn't interrupt
Tonight
it.
came from
This
here,
is
Muffin the
the
Mule,
this evening.
Panorama, News Night.
famous
It's the
room
big
was
documentary,
invited
Eamon,
to
your
a
big
very
moment.
celebration.
Ludovic Kennedy's going to present it. Tell Ludo he's a big... Oh, the
Lime
door's
Grove
closed. No, it's open.
Studios.
Away you go,
This
Eamon.
is your knife.
Eamon,
I mean,
love.
wife. No,
Where's he gone?
Can we go back to the shiny black limousines? I like that bit the best.
Lime Grove's one of the most exciting places you could think of in the United Kingdom. It's where it was all at. It was where it was all happening.
I think it's time they put a bomb under the building or pulled it down, because it really was a ghastly place to work. Extremely uncomfortable, horribly overcrowded rooms, hot in the summer.
Lime Grove is such a shambles today, and it always was a shambles. It was always a pathetic old pile. But Lime Grove was the womb.
It had got character, it got atmosphere. It's exciting coming here. Not like these ghastly places we have to go to now. Inhuman they are.
I've always been frightened of it. I've always rather hated it, as a matter of fact. It always reminded me of school. Too many prefects.
here in the Lime Grove studio, we're waiting for the first result.
I will bid you good night, and our next night will be on Monday.
I'm not going to take part in that game to satisfy a television panel.
Air-conditioned where we wait.
And on that basis, if the whole country behaves like that, a swing of between 2 and 2.5...
accept that, do you? No, I don't.
I'm sorry, it was.
One of yesterday's men. One of yesterday's men.
Beware! Dick Muffin waves his tail. He rounds them up and he tracks them down, follows them round and round the town, wearing a most important crown. Dick Muffin's on the trail.
For those of us who used to work here, the deserted offices and studios of this hideous building are full of ghosts. For 10 years, during the 1950s, it was where all BBC television programs originated. The bridge between the village hall atmosphere of Alexandra Palace and the smooth professionalism of the television centre. Later, it became the home of BBC Current Affairs. Those of us who were here in the early days were, in a sense, pioneers, experimenters, skeptics, working at a time of rapid change, a change in which the deeply conservative BBC was transformed, much against its will, from being an organ of total conformity to one of non-conformity. It was in 1949 that BBC Television bought Lime Grove, almost in a fit of absent-mindedness.
There was a great deal of opposition to it. I've got some old memos here. There's one here, for example, to the Director of Administration from Norman Collins, who was the boss man, the controller of television at the time. And he says, talking about Lime Grove, the design of the building, with no studios on the ground floor, 3 studios on the first floor, and 2 on the second floor, is, however, such that it is absolutely unideal. And he goes on to say, the attached photograph is more than a little flattering, because it's been taken by trick photography. And in reality, the studios are in a highly congested and built-up area. And with your agreement, I think that we can finally write off these premises as being of no interest to us.
Lime Grove, Shepherd's Bush, the spacious Gainsborough studios, which as announced on Wednesday have been bought by the BBC as an additional studio centre for television. Television producers are eagerly looking forward to working in these studios as soon as possible.
Television as such was regarded with what might be called high-minded hostility by Broadcasting House. There's no question about that. And who is to say that they were totally mistaken in that the view was that a visual culture carries very, very great danger. That civilization is an advance from the cave drawings at Altamira and Lascaux to a composite written language. And now television is reversing the advance, and we're going back to the cave dwellings of Altamira and Lascaux.
Another amusing memo, calling of artists from dressing rooms. An artist required on the set for rehearsal can get lost for 20 minutes or so fairly easily. And while call boys or secretaries can be sent looking for them, they get lost too in the search.
Muffin the Mule was a much-loved character of a children's programme of the time. And it was a gala programme for children that was the first to go out from Lime Grove when the studios were officially opened in May 1950 by Mrs. Attlee, wife of the Prime Minister.
It's always exciting to be at the beginning of anything new. Perhaps in years to come, you'll be telling your children how you saw the first children's hour ever to be televised from Lime Grove Studios. This large studio is going to be used solely for your programs. Your program is going to be so varied that there's sure to be something that will interest each one of you.
This is our percussion band. Yes, it's a one-man band, isn't it, Muffy? Yes, one mule band. Sorry.
In the early 50s, when the BBC was a monopoly, you knew as you left the studios and you saw that blue electronic glare on people's curtains that they had the television set on and they could have only been watching one thing. That was your show.
Or else they could have dropped off to sleep.
I found 2 statue cleaners from the Ministry of Works giving the king a wash and brush up. And it struck me that they must have a very interesting job.
It was to be a long time before BBC television abandoned this plodding image. Programs were wordy, slow and dull, all tailor-made for family viewing.
Now we ask you to imagine that in 1596, the Elizabethans had a television service of their own. And join us as we put back the clock. I bid you look.
A prime example of what the television critic Peter Black called twee-vie was an entire evening given over to Elizabethan charades.
Late was long from the low country with never a penny of money.
So now we will light the fuse. Bravo.
And there is my stew of coney with its rich seasonings, and beside it I will lay a piece of the castle wall.
Rightly is Master Harbour known as the epicure of cooks.
And then, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. A new breed of television man emerged in Lime Grove, and their stamping ground was sport.
Paul and I were known as the, some brothers, what were they?
The Messina brothers.
The Messina brothers, who were, I suppose they were the mafia of the time. And they got up to all kinds of skullduggery, I think in an illegal way. I think a lot of what we did was illegal within BBC terms. I don't think we were breaking laws. For example, we weren't allowed to pay for interviews at that time. Well, I would hate to admit the number of times I paid to get an interview because there was no other way of doing it. And I think we broke all the BBC rules. We must have all have been independent thinkers. And in the main, I don't think really gave a damn for anybody. And that's not the usual attitude in the BBC.
Good evening. Welcome to Sportsview. Tonight's program ranges from racing to boxing, from football to skating.
I wrote a memo to Peter Dimmock, who was then the assistant head of Outside Broadcast, and I suggested to him that we should launch a midweek sports program. And I thought it would be quite a good idea if he himself introduced it, which I thought helped to bring the memo, gave the memo that flavor that was needed.
Good evening. Welcome to Sportsview.
This evening, we've sent a mobile unit to Wolverhampton Wanderers, the Football League champions. And to find out what's happening at Wolverhampton tonight, we can see their training. David Coleman, please come in.
Well, now, what makes the Wolves such a remarkably successful club? What goes on behind the scenes?
Sportsview was the first sports program combined with journalism. It was a journalistic program, and we were trying to beat the newspapers at their own game. We had the advantage of going on the air around 9 o'clock in the evening, and so the newspapers had to follow us instead of the other way around. And I think this is the first time this had really happened in a television program. One of the things that helped put Sportsview on the map early on was Roger Bannister's 4-minute mile at Iffley Road in Oxford. We had a car standing by, and the moment he achieved it, he was put into this car, rushed here to Lime Grove to the studio, and we got him into Sportsview literally in the last 2 minutes of the program. Mind you, Roger Bannister said afterwards he'd never drive in a BBC car again.
Finish with one in a bit. Let's have a bit.
There was something truly pioneering about the program. It was the first magazine program that used all the television techniques that were available at that time. After all, Sportsview was the very first program that used a teleprompter. I mean, Dimmock couldn't have read the scripts if he wouldn't have been able to read it off the teleprompter.
It really began because I went to America, and while I was out there, I saw in the CBS News studio the autocue, which was a typewriter, and the words came up in front of the lens. And I realized how much it improved the speed of programs. You could get in 30 minutes, for example, what would normally take nearly 40 minutes, because your links were so much faster. Well, the BBC couldn't afford to buy it from America at that stage, but we were in the studio, and one of the engineers said, I could make one up for you, Peter. And that meant that you had the script on a roll, which was put on with black felt pen. That then went into the mirror, and then that was reflected onto an angled piece of plain glass between me and the camera. So I could see the script. It was all pretty Heath Robinson. And then the question was, how do we make the script move in front of the mirror? So we got a mangle, of all things, an ordinary mangle, and turned the handle. And that's how the autocue began in British television.
Dimmock was able to read the script as we were going along, so that was able to give the program the pace.
And now here for his first television interview since he announced his retirement.
We then, when we went to the Saturday afternoon program, we really showed the audience exactly what was happening in the studio. I mean, David Coleman, for example, would never make a secret of the fact that he had a deaf aid in his ear in order to hear the producer, in order to hear the latest sports flash. Peter Dimmock would never worry about whether the telephone was available. The phone would ring in the middle of the program to give him something. Peter would pick up the phone and would give the thing out. So all those things worked and were shown to the audience. Of course, it was a sports program, but above all, it was also a news program.
In most other fields than sport, the same respectable, lifeless programs continued to be churned out, until the mid-50s, when there came the chill wind of competition from the businesslike ITV.
I think his name was Lasky or something like that. He used to sing a song called, what was it? Busy Bee or Busy Bee, Busy something like that. Anyway, I wonder what became of him. He's not dead, is he?
No, he's not. No, he's not dead, no. Just passed over to the other side. Commercial.
By 1957, well over 70% of the total audiences every night watched ITV. And one of the reasons was that, high-minded though we were, we failed in entertainment. So that on a Saturday night, there was an outside broadcast show called Saturday Night Out.
Outside broadcast. We're starting now.
One didn't know where they were going to go. What you saw was OB vans leaving a garage. Then you cut to where they went, and you saw a visit to a fish curing factory in Grimsby. Now that, on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock, is not exactly what people wanted to see.
With ITV now making the running with light entertainment and news, how was the BBC to respond? The answer was in the field where ITV was weakest, high-quality programs about current affairs. And the person who brought that about was a woman, Mrs. Grace Wyndham Goldie. Grace Wyndham Goldie had been a radio and television critic for The Listener. Now, as assistant head of talks at Lime Grove, she was a terror to all who worked under her, with much the same dogmatic way of expressing herself as Margaret Thatcher, and, like her, a radical who was determined to have her own way.
It's always been one of my personal aims, and indeed one of the reasons why I went into television. I knew that this was going to be an enormously powerful force in the world. So, I thought I would like to have a hand in what it was doing.
I first met her when she came on a trip to Washington, where I was the BBC's news correspondent in those days. Well, then the head of television talks, Mary Adams, was moved, and both Grace and I put in for the job, and it was obviously a close-run thing. I got it, but I was immediately asked if I would like to have her as the assistant head. There wasn't such a job advertised, and if I'd had any sense, if I'd known Grace better, I would have said no, because Grace wasn't designed to be the assistant head of anything.
She had an iron win, it was once said of her, and it catches the spirit of the woman. She argued to assertion. She would take a position, and you had to find a way of moving her off the position if it was clearly untenable, but without getting involved in a very emotional argument. And it was an acquired skill. It was certainly a survival skill if you were going to work with Grace over any period of time. She could go down half an hour before transmission and say, that was absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
We've got to do it. We've got to start again. We must begin in the middle, or whatever.
Yeah.
No one else had the nerve to do that. And she used to, in that sense, she used to terrorize the people who worked for her.
Grace's strength lay in an extraordinary flair for picking young men straight out of university and putting them into positions of power. Those like Peacock, Milne and Donald Baverstock, who would all later go on to run the BBC. The three programmes she brought to a high standard of excellence were Panorama, Tonight, and the arts programme Monitor, presented by Hugh Weldon. But it was in the coverage of election programmes that her influence was first felt.
Just 30 minutes ago, the polling stations closed and voting in the general election ended.
Grace believed both that TV had a duty to politicians to present them at their best, and that elections made good television because they were about conflict. She also saw no reason why, if the interest was still there, election results should not continue to be broadcast throughout the night. At the time, a quite revolutionary concept.
Well, we are starting up at 9:15 on polling day. We're going on till 4 in the morning. As you know, results were coming in from up till about 4 o'clock in the morning, and as we feel that this is a service to the public, we shouldn't stop just when we fancy it, but we should go on giving them the results up while they're still coming out.
We're having, in fact, cameras in 16 places where counts are taking place, and 20 OB units in all will be covering 28 different places during the 2 days with OBs of all sorts and shapes, sizes.
And at the spider's web centre of it all was the calm, rotund, reassuring figure of Richard Dimbleby.
Here, in the Lime Grove studio, we're waiting for the first results. From the first results, we can probably tell, to quite an extent, what is likely to happen in this general election.
He loved doing a programme like the general election, but he was aware that it was risky professionally. And he wrote about one of them, 55 I think it was, that it's generally accepted that half an hour on television is long enough for anybody. And he goes on to say that, you know, you can go on for 3/4 of an hour if you've got something else for people to look at. But the idea of going on for 7 hours, followed by a further programme of another 12 hours, is actually nothing short of lunacy. And he obviously felt that the thing was a great event, but that it was a kind of crazy undertaking the BBC was doing.
Now I think we must go back to Richard Dimbleby in the London studio.
Well, there was our first result, and Butler?
There was a swing to the Conservatives of just over 2%. If every constituency in the country behaves as Cheltenham has done, there will be a majority of about 115 for the Conservatives over Labour.
And now we take you from London straight to Salford.
He had a telephone there sitting in front of him, that old-fashioned black telephone. And people watching this looked at it and thought that they could ring him up. That telephone simply went to the gallery. It was no good at all. The London Exchange got blocked by people doing this because it sort of spread. Everybody saw this telephone, hadn't seen it before. And then he had to broadcast things saying, please, this telephone isn't real, and sort of pick it up and show that it wasn't to get people to stop doing it.
And back in the studio here, David Butler wishes to give a short session in swing.
I think it was 3.5 hours ago that Bob Mackenzie said that Labour needed that swing.
An enormous amount of effort went into the visual aids. We tried to make a model of the House of Commons with a ping-pong ball representing every member of Parliament. We tried to make the election a horse race with people going around, the two parties going around the track. We tried various graphical devices, and I find here the whole series of suggestions, most of which were quite impractical, for how you could actually make the thing more vivid. Grace had a deep suspicion she'd once been let down by a magnetic thing on a map which had fallen off on air, and she wouldn't let us have anything magnetic.
What we're showing in these results.
And I'll be aided by an enormous number of charts and graphs and so on, which we'll be talking to later in the evening.
We now have a technically far more complicated operation. Many, many more cameras, many, many more counts and OBs, much quicker use of information. And finally, our battle is to turn it back into a human program again. Whereas in those days, I think it had a much more human face. Everybody sat round the studio in Lime Grove chatting, because actually a general election is a great human story.
And there's a special message from me at the end which says, Piers, you must be thirsty. Water.
All demonstrate
Water.
Political television in the general election program, in the party politicals, in the election broadcasts, these were where people learnt what politicians looked like on the screen, people they didn't know before as human beings.
We have suffered neither a landslide nor a disaster, but a setback.
It was from these walls that they began to know politicians in the very different way they know them now. The British public is much more volatile than it was, the electorate. People switch in by-elections and general elections and opinion polls from side to side much more than they did. I'm quite certain the biggest single factor in explaining that volatility is television.
We are going very shortly to close down. A little snooze for all concerned, and you too, I hope. The service is opening up again at 6:30 in about 2 hours and a half and a bit from now. We ourselves, live, fresh, shaved, suits changed, clean, alert and breakfasted, will be sitting here again at 8 o'clock. Panorama is called the window on the world. I think we must have as much of the world as we can get in it.
Yes, you can't have it both ways. You've got to be topical as well.
Yeah, if you look at next week's program, we've got Africa.
Yes, Robert Key's film is in from Central Africa. And then James Morris is in Edinburgh with the silent camera.
Well, this strange little underlit, overheated room is really, or was at the time, the panorama attic in one of the houses stretching along from the Lime Grove studios, where, when the program first began, we had our weekly script conferences, which we then had on a Friday afternoon.
We were a bit like a game of cricket that was being played for the first time on the beach, and we had to invent the rules for cricket as well as learn how to play the game.
Panorama started as a rag bag of a program of mostly trivial items. It took Grace and Leonard Mile to fashion it into a serious program which people would have to take seriously.
We weren't concerned with informing Westminster about what was going on in the world. We wanted to reach to Wigan. And so the first premise was, nothing must be too long, nothing must bore.
Your Grace, many people in England find it a little hard to understand that an archbishop can be so involved in politics. I wonder if you could explain how that came about.
Well, the Archbishop... There was the civil war raging in Cyprus. We sent Woodrow Wyatt to report on it, and he interviewed Archbishop Makarios, who was then regarded rather as IRA terrorists are regarded now. And Churchill got on to Sir Ian Jacob and told him that he ought to stop this program.
I pointed out to Churchill on the telephone, I said, one mustn't imagine that appearing on television automatically does somebody good. They may expose themselves as being horrors.
Jacob said he was going to have a look at it, and he came down and watched it with me here in Lime Grove. And there came a moment when Woodrow Wyatt asked the Archbishop how he justified being a Christian Archbishop and supporting terrorism. And Makarios gave an extraordinary sort of shifty look out of the corner of his eye, and then gave a bland answer.
Announced the campaign of violence.
I am opposed to the use of violence, but at the same time...
And Jacob said to me afterwards, you know, if I'd just heard that answer on radio or read it in the Times, I would have taken it at its face value. But television gives you a moment of truth you don't get with these other media. And the moment I saw that shifting look out of the corner of his eye, I knew you couldn't trust him an inch. So we'll carry the program. And he rang Churchill up and said we were going to transmit it.
But he was not convinced at all. He just said, Jacob, he said, I never would have believed it of you, and put down the telephone.
Now, the interesting thing was that about a year later, we sent Chris Chataway to interview Makarios in Athens. And Chataway asked him some question about collaborating with the Turkish minority. And once again, Makarios gave this extraordinarily shifty look out of the corner of his eye, and then gave another bland answer. Now, the fact is, on this particular occasion, a little dog walked across the square and started to relieve itself against the Archbishop's foot. Now, where was the moment of television truth?
The Makarios incident was the first of what were to be many rows between the government of the day, whether Labour or Conservative, and the nabobs of Lime Grove. The worst were to come later, but the most immediate was about the Anglo-French invasion of Suez. At that time, and it's hard to believe now, we were not allowed to discuss any political issue within 14 days of it being debated in Parliament. Yet Suez was an issue that bitterly divided the country, and to have ignored it would have been a dereliction of duty. So how did Panorama cope?
Mike had this brilliant idea, let's do a world reaction story on Suez. And we all set off. You were in Australia.
Well, I was running in the Olympic Games.
You were in the Olympics.
Yes.
And you came in with stuff. And we had people all over the world.
You would have been better off doing a panorama at the time.
Yeah, I would, actually, yes.
Well,
I didn't do anything.
You did a piece for us.
Yeah.
And everybody did pieces.
Now, the first angry feeling of dismay over the British invasion of Egypt has more or less died away. But there remains a very strong feeling that we, the British, have done something inept.
No doubt whatever as to the Indian reaction to Anglo-French policy in Egypt. It is one of intense disapproval.
It's made us extremely angry and depressed because the act is immoral in itself, and we have associated the name of England with a higher standard of integrity in international affairs.
The world reaction to Suez was totally negative. And this totally negative programme went out, and there was a bloody awful row in the House of Commons. The Tory party went absolutely mad.
We felt obliged, obviously, to try and reflect in our programmes the debate that was going on over Suez, the arguments against what we and the French were doing. And of course the Eden government at the time thought this was almost tantamount to treason, that we were undermining what they were doing.
They were all young, they were all active, they were all rebellious. They were all the kind of people that the BBC got terribly worried about later in the 60s, and they were rebellious and they asked questions, and the programme had a lot of punch in those days.
Is there any colour bar on British Railways?
No, there is no colour bar on British Railways.
On Tuesday, I went to Smithfield. This is Mr. Davis, the goods agent in charge of Smithfield Depot. How many vacancies have you at the moment?
It's 9 vacancies for staff at the moment.
We entered into a piece of deception on the colour bar on British Rail, which I'm not sure would really be allowed now. First of all, interviewed the manager at I think it was Euston.
It was a goods yard.
That's right. Yeah. And he said, no, absolutely no colour bar at all. Unthinkable. And then we sent down an obviously presentable black chap who applied for the job.
They were turned down. And I learnt that to them it was no new experience.
I went to the manager and asked for if he needed any porter. He told me that there was no vacancy for no porter.
So then we went back in again and said to the manager, what about it?
Now, Mr. Davis, you have vacancies here.
Oh, yes.
But now 4 coloured men came this morning to ask for jobs and they were turned away. Why was that?
I see.
Now, officially, the policy is that there's no colour bar.
That got a lot of criticism. I mean, that was reckoned to be very dirty reporting indeed.
These coloured chaps.
The other current affairs programme which Grace and Leonard helped to build up was the popular long-running Tonight, edited by Donald Baverstock. In Panorama, we used to be slightly condescending towards Tonight, the froth as we saw it on top of Panorama's solid 4X.
Good evening. One of the critics of this programme was nice enough to say the other day that Tonight introduces its viewers to some of the more unusual things that go on in the world.
I recognized in them a kind of peculiar quality of human existence and a recognition of their attitude to life, which they were prepared to express in terms of a visual as well as an oral medium.
Dance hall, Saturday night. I've been caught around the wrong side of the desk. I'll see you around the other side. I've got to come here to say goodnight. I've got a button. And she died yesterday, aged 77. An egg. Just one solitary egg.
Egg and chips, chop and chips, ham and chips, sausage and chips, fish and chips, beans and chips, egg, bacon and chips, tongue and chips, pie and chips, and then at the bottom in very large letters, chips.
The Tonight Show, which was totally surprising, very largely irreverent, producing totally new conventions, actually tethered an audience's attention between 6 and 7 in the evening, so that between 57 and 60, the BBC recaptured a great deal of the audience again.
Well, tonight we're going to meet, among other people, a smoking dog called Butch and a horse-racing butcher called Bacon. And we'll be looking round the north, east, south-west of the Midlands. Now let's look in the direction of Cy Grant.
Heartache today for the Deb's delights. No more of those glamorous nights.
We could not bear the thought of boring the pants off the audience by taking things too earnestly every night. We didn't really have anything to say to the audience. We had questions to ask. And every so often we had to laugh at the crazy world.
They've got a keyboard up here which they can use to play the bells with too. Let's have a look. You've just got to touch one of these notes, I'm told, ever so lightly, and boing.
With that, good night, and don't forget to see you tonight on Monday night. Good night.
"7:30 a.m. A member of the Tonight team keeps abreast of the news.
We'd get in about 9:30 and we'd look at what we'd got. We had basically 40 minutes to fill and basically nothing to put in it.
9:30 a.m. The production team discusses an item for possible inclusion in tonight's programme.
We would have got,
Yep.
for instance, Robert Key in
Right.
to talk about
Lumumba, absolutely,
because he
yes.
was the first person to ever meet him.
Quite right, yes.
Bush babies vanished from zoo cage.
Oh, yes.
We'd have got a bush baby.
A bush baby in the studio.
You would have done. I
On the
would
nature of
have
bush babies.
Yes.
It was also very important to try and balance, obviously, you know, the heavyweight material with the lighter weight.
10 o'clock. All adjourn to the canteen to discuss progress over a coffee.
I always thought of Tonight as a kind of hunting band. I mean, the hunt is deep in the human genes and psyche. It's a daily task. You go out in the morning, you come back with the carcass in the evening, or you don't. And Tonight was a bit like that.
Lime Grove was immensely competitive. One is always thinks in television of competition between the BBC and ITV. But the competition between the BBC and ITV was nothing as compared to the competition between different programs. They were so sharp, the competition between Panorama and Tonight, for example. Spies were sent, usually assistant film editors, from one cutting room to the other in order to see what one was doing or the other was doing. And Tonight in particular had the theory that they could do in 3 minutes what the documentaries could do only in 50 minutes. So that, for example, when it came to showing the birth of a baby, which the then science producer had got in a film, the editor of Tonight procured a Danish birth of a baby and showed that at 7 o'clock.
We had our leader, and that was Donald, you know, our grubby, exuberant leader, who we shouted at and argued with, but who we followed, you know, with our heads down and our striding through the mire. We were a sort of little band apart, with a kind of crusade to do the thing in this new land of television that we thought was the right way it should go.
11 o'clock. A Tonight film unit samples people's opinions on the street.
We did what we'd call a vox pop, where you just want to go out and say, what do people feel about this?
Do you often eat haggis? Oh, I did at one time, but now I've just stopped it now.
You wouldn't talk to them about big issues like, do you think we ought to join the European Monetary Union or anything like that?
Well, it got such a hold on me that I had to lay off it. I just couldn't work unless I had some haggis.
You might talk to them about whether Pit Bull Terrier should be put down or just licensed, something that their view is as good as anybody else's on.
Excuse me, are you worried about anything in your life?
Yes, getting married.
What's worrying about that?
I don't want to get too tied down.
What, are you getting married to each other, are you?
Yes, obviously. Well, I'm the comedian on the local operatic society.
What's worrying about that?
Well, people come in the shop and they expect me to be funny off the stage as well as on.
What is it that worries you?
Well, my holidays, where I'm going to go for my holidays.
Well, how do they worry you?
Well, I always have to go to Wales every year.
12:30. It's tiring work writing a script for the Tonight programme.
Tonight was radical in a tradition of English journalism that goes from Cobbett to Cudlip to Picture Post. There was a period in the history of the Daily Mirror when it was very serious and very populist at the same time, and Tonight tried to capture that flavour.
This man was a friendly face among you, mixing freely with the crowd which a cricket game had brought together. He shared cigarettes and a scorecard with an English couple who sat beside him. He was neat, clean, wholly acceptable as your neighbour.
We created a language,
now he has chosen
not just a visual language, but a language in commentary, which was understood by a school leaver of 16 and was not despised by a university graduate at 24. Now, this was a very rare achievement. You've got to bear in mind that the press is deeply class-ridden and divided between the quality press and the tabloids. And they've never, ever found a language which would be equally understood by a school leaver and by a university graduate.
No one knows how many yards of sweat make up the nation's linen, but several black hands are busy with the job of keeping Britain white.
We were not constructed by God to take in words through our eyes. We were made to take in pictures through the eyes and words through the ears. And television suddenly liberated you to talk to people like that, to say, look at the pictures and listen to the words. And at that level, rather than having to read acres of small print, people would be interested in all sorts of things, we felt, and things that were not thought of as general popular television.
Meanwhile, in Mexico, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. Reporter Alan Wicker braves the heat to do a piece to camera.
A sleepy Mexican fishing village, where time moves imperceptibly from fiesta to fiesta. The month when the Arabs spend their days fasting and their nights feasting.
A brash, air-conditioned nightmare where we wait forever under neon for a jackpot that never turns up.
I think the important thing in those days was that all of us had had a life before television. After us, you had people like David Frost, let's say, enormously talented and experienced television man, but a television animal. That the next generation were television creatures.
4 o'clock. The all-important questions for tonight's interview are mulled over.
ITN are great ones for claiming nowadays, and Robbie Day in particular, they invented proper questions. I don't believe that for a second, actually, we did.
If this score sits on the piano, is there some point at which you can just form a chord and say, look, this, I feel, is the sort of music that I would write and no one else? Possibly because I'm now in America, possibly because I'm reflecting American
Well,
people,
now you're putting words in my now you're putting words in my mouth.
Tonight was the first program that really worried about questions, that paid all the respect that is due to an interviewer's questions, that we worked on. Otherwise, the interviewer had gone into the studio with a few notes written on his hand, and interviews were regarded as fillers For tonight, it was the crux and the peak.
Can we,
I've been through them.
How do you know them?
I know them off by heart.
Yeah, good.
I bet you when he goes
She not
through
only
them,
knows
he'll
the
find
questions, she knows the answer.
You know, it's very easy to answer questions if you're bold and easy, kind of half volley, to hit it straight back. But if you actually have to stop and think, then that in itself makes fascinating television. The thought process going on.
How much, Mr. Issigonis, do you dictate to us what we want? How much do we dictate to you what we want? Who dominates? Does the designer dominate the buyer, or does the buyer dominate the designer?
Living in, the butterfly world of pop as a Beatle, do you find that this undermines people's serious acceptance of you as a writer?
If there was one gesture you could make to show the personification of unconquerable ineffectuality, what would that be?
How long have you got now?
About 30, 32 minutes, something like that.
Yes, but we need one. Well, we need an extra 5, maybe an extra 6, because we don't. None of this will extend.
No, that's true enough.
You know it is, Derek.
6:05. From Studio H, Lime Grove, Tonight transmits to 8 million people.
Now we bid you good night. The next Tonight will be tomorrow night. Good night.
Yes. I do think we were arrogant. I think there were occasions when we were, yes, rather above our station.
Arrogant. Were we arrogant? I'm afraid we probably were, yes. We wouldn't have thought of it as arrogant. We would have said we were confident. But one of the things that united us, and does with a lot of groups, I think more than admit it, was the feeling that we were really good.
I remember the most satisfactory letter that arrived at Tonight office that was from a viewer who said, "Why isn't Tonight running the country?" And I think we also felt that the viewer probably had a point.
In the early 60s, the bulk of BBC television moved out of Lime Grove, leaving current affairs in sole charge. For us in Panorama, it was a golden period, crisscrossing the world to bring back world stories, covering important international events live by satellite, welcoming the great and the good into the studios each Monday evening. We had a steady audience of 8 million, and were in some danger of getting swollen-headed.
The Prime Minister answers questions from London, Paris and New York on Britain's decision to apply once again for membership of the European Common Market. Facing him in the London studio,
in the Panorama studio now, the Right Honourable Edward Heath on this week's Tory conference.
Tonight, the stormiest session ever of the Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference has ended. In 24 hours, the man at the centre of the storm.
I'd never felt so powerful as at the age of 29, having the whole of 24 hours at my disposal. I mean, I didn't really feel that there was any Prime Minister or President in the world who had as much direct power as I did. There was plenty of money. The budget was quite adequate. You had I think there were 5 film crews who could be sent anywhere in the world to cover anything. Anyone picking up a telephone would be at one's disposal. It was a wonderful moment. It was a wonderful moment in, it seemed to me at the time, the history of the world.
President Johnson had some news for us too.
24 hours talks to President of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda. Now Mr. James Callaghan is giving up as Chancellor to become Home Secretary.
Lime Grove produced good journalism that was independent and considered. Its fault was, it began to feel, I think, that it could take on politics, that these people here at Lime Grove were superior to the politicians in their nasty humdrum world, pleasing and pandering to the electors.
May I put the problem in a slightly different way, Prime Minister?
As soon as you confront party politicians, as soon as you take on the Labour Party or the Conservative government, then you've had it, because they're going to fight back, and they're going to fight dirty, and they're going to shatter this myth of aloofness. So that was the mistake. It became too arrogant.
In the Panorama studio, Mr. Edward Heath, Leader of the Opposition. With me to question him, James Mossman and Robert McNeill.
In the mid-60s, Ted Heath came into Lime Grove and they put on a film which, it was at the height of his unpopularity and the depth of his unpopularity.
He may not have demonstrated as much power as he ought to have done. I know he's a brilliant man, but he's yet got to show that power of leadership.
They then asked him questions about it, and it really looked like bear baiting.
How low does your personal rating among your own supporters have to go before you consider yourself a liability to the party you lead?
Well, popularity isn't everything. In fact, it isn't the most important thing. What matters is doing what you believe to be right.
Soon hardly a month passed without rows between Lime Grove and the BBC governors, or Lime Grove and the government of the day, whatever its colour. One of the most bitter resulted from David Dimbleby's satirical documentary on the Labour opposition. He called it Yesterday's Men.
Like Humpty Dumpty, he sat on a wall, giving the orders, and then, in the midst of it all, he had a great fall. Now he's one of yesterday's men.
Yesterday's Men was an idea I had in the bath, to make a film about what it was like to be out of office, because Labour had suddenly been thrown out in 1970.
One of yesterday's men, the yesterday's men, and it's no fun at all, getting sacked and put out to grave.
We talked to people for a long time and cut them down very fine, which they knew would happen.
I think you adjust very quickly. If you're in politics, you expect to have periods on the government side and periods on the opposition side.
Oh, I think, yes, great humiliation. It was very unexpected, certainly to me, and I don't believe anybody who says they expected it.
It was a sudden turnaround of expectation, and I wouldn't deny for a moment that an hour before...
What they didn't know was the title, Yesterday's Men, which was their own political slogan turned back on them, because we thought we could get away with using it like a headline in a newspaper article, where you write the article and then you put any headline over it. And that was, I think, a bit naive of us. So they didn't know that. And they didn't know that the Scaffold was going to be commissioned to write a little ditty called We're Yesterday's Men and It's No Fun at All. But actually within that, the way the programme was constructed, as a reflection of their opinion, was absolutely objective and fair.
Only Harold Wilson became richer in opposition. Using his privileged access to government papers, he wrote 300,000 words in 6 months about Labour's time in office.
But if we had been able to stop the programme, certainly we would have. Indeed, if I'd had the materials, I would have blown up the studio myself. It was a disgrace. I mean, that should never be forgotten, that it was the most deceitful episode in the BBC's political history.
The only reason it got into difficulties was Harold Wilson objected me asking him about why he was writing a book and earning a great deal of money from it instead of getting on with organising the Labour Party in opposition, which is what all or many of his own colleagues had been complaining about to me. So it was a perfectly legitimate question to put, but somehow it touched a raw nerve.
Why did you think people would be interested in reading about your years in office? Is it proper for a man who hopes one day again to be Prime Minister to write in the way that you have, in particular about the civil service?
It eventually culminated in a row in Harold Wilson's room between Dimbleby and Wilson over the question of Wilson's money, how much money he had, how much he had got for his book. Wilson said, I'm not going to have any more of this. You don't ask Heath questions about his yacht. The filming was stopped by me. I think some lessons were learned, though obviously David Dimbleby did well out of it. He's still with you. He should have been sent to a desert island without his 8 records as consolation. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die.
It has all the symptoms of a love letter from a betrayed girlfriend, because current affairs journalists felt a great surge of hope and expectation in '64 when the Labour Party was elected. Things were going to change. And I think television journalists who'd felt as a group that a new dawn was coming and they were going to be part of the new elite guiding this society felt betrayed by the politicians. But it really was born of superiority, which I think could only have been bred in these closed, claustrophobic confines of the Lime Grove bunker.
Yesterday's Men wasn't the end of an era, no, it was potentially the beginning of an era that we never saw, I think.
Yesterday we were front page news. Now there's only the past to confront us. There's only the past to confront us.
What it did was to be more outspoken, and that led to the politicians deciding that this medium of television, if it had that kind of power, if it could do that kind of, have that kind of impact on the way people thought, had to be reined back, had to have guy ropes put up and be held down to the ground.
But Yesterday's Men was only the beginning. Even more serious were the rows about programmes on Northern Ireland. When I was asked to chair a 2-hour debate on the province, the government was so frightened by the mayhem they thought might ensue, they asked the BBC governors to call it off. The governors refused. Much speculation and some misunderstanding about the nature of the programme you are about to see. There was no mayhem. Indeed, it was a very dull programme, and within a few days it was forgotten. But more rows followed, and politicians whose opinions television had once done so much to promote now contracted out.
Lime Grove was the cockpit. It used to be the arena where politics and television came together.
During this election, I found that the voters, while they are preoccupied, naturally enough.
To start with, of course, the politicians, they were very afraid of television. In the late 50s, they adjusted to the fact that television was important.
But I must try and forget all this.
In the 60s, the politicians accepted that broadcasting was part of the Fourth Estate and had its own constitutional independence.
I've had criticism all through my political life.
But they've now become so clever at using television.
No, I'm not answering any questions about...
So adroit at rephrasing the question, at ignoring the question and giving their own answer.
Say you had no intention of putting up prescription charges.
Let me give you the question and the answer, not interpretations.
They're now able to control the end product of television to a far greater extent than has ever been the case up to now.
What has happened over the years is that the politicians, I mean, they've all surrounded themselves with things called spin doctors and minders and hairdressers and heaven knows what else, and that they therefore wish to treat with television, and indeed with the press and the radio for that matter, on their own terms. And by on their own terms, it means that they are not as anywhere near as freewheeling or happy to come in and have on camera the sort of frank arguments which one knows they have in the tea rooms of the House of Commons.
It's a part of the political power game, and certainly part of the tradition of this building, that the worlds of politics and the media should clash, the one endeavouring to present itself to the electorate in the best possible light, the other never prepared to accept such claims uncritically. Perhaps it is right that this story of Lime Grove should end with the tale of Mrs. Thatcher and Mrs. Gould and the sinking of the Belgrano.
Time for us now to go nationwide with Sue Lawley, a very special edition with the Prime Minister on the spot.
There was in the 1983 election an incident which I think symbolised something of where the relationship between the politicians and the broadcasters had got to when Mrs. Thatcher came to Lime Grove for the On the Spot programme.
Good evening. Nationwide tonight is the general election campaign.
Mrs. Thatcher had learnt many of the techniques of television and many of the techniques of the interviewers, and went in a great deal for controlled media appearances like photo opportunities. And interviewing Mrs. Thatcher had become a bit like professional wrestling. You sort of thought that you saw a lot of blood and you heard a lot of groans, but actually it was tomato ketchup on the floor. She'd learned many of the techniques of the interviewers.
We've been asking for questions over the past 2 weeks.
The basic idea was, here was a chance for the audience, from regional studios or from the Lime Grove studio, to ask questions of the Prime Minister.
Then that
we selected very carefully the people who'd written in, making sure they were relatively tough-minded and articulate. And we said, listen, ask a supplementary. Don't simply ask your question and sit back. Keep going at the Prime Minister.
Her questioner was a Mrs. Diana Gould, who, with the persistence denied to the professional interviewer, refused to take no for an answer.
Mrs. Gould, your question, please.
Mrs. Thatcher, why, when the Belgrano, the Argentinian battleship,
was outside the exclusion zone and actually sailing away from the Falklands, why did you give the orders to sink it?
But it was not sailing away from the Falklands. It was in an area which was a danger to our ships.
Mrs. Thatcher, you started your answer by saying it was not sailing away from the Falklands. It was on a bearing of 280, and it was already west of the Falklands. So I'm sorry, but I cannot see how you can say it was not sailing away from the Falklands.
When it was sunk.
When it was sunk.
It was a danger to our ships.
No, but you have just said at the beginning of your answer that
And this grey-haired geography mistress started harrying her and asking her questions and persisting in questions in a way that Mrs. Thatcher was completely caught by surprise. No television interviewer would have dared to use the techniques that Mrs. Gould used on Mrs. Thatcher. She didn't know which direction Mrs. Gould was coming from, and Mrs. Gould drew real blood.
Danger to our ships.
Mrs. Thatcher, I am saying that it was on a bearing 280, which is a bearing just north of west. It was already west of the Falklands, and therefore nobody with any imagination can put it sailing other than away from the Falklands.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Mrs. Gould. I think seeing it, you do see that she does look as if she's getting a bit het up, but her voice doesn't show it so much, I don't think, and of course I could only hear her, I couldn't see her.
When it was sunk, it was in an area which was a danger to our ships. Well, now, you accept that, do you?
No, I don't.
I'm sorry, it was.
I had nothing to lose. I mean, it wasn't my job. I wasn't a professional interviewer. I was completely unknown. I think it was much easier for me to do it than it would have been for a professional, but I do wish some professionals would do it a bit more.
Well, when I came down from the studio gallery here, I was delighted with the programme. It seemed to me to be democracy in action, one iron lady taking on another. But I was a little bit concerned about what would happen on the studio floor. When I came through, Mrs. Thatcher was already deep in conversation with Sir Gordon Rees and other of her supporters. But they were all reassuring her. No, Margaret, you've done very well indeed. Went very well. She was looking slightly quizzically, but no, they said it was excellent. And then we headed downstairs to hospitality. I had a sort of feeling that the reaction downstairs there would be rather different. Well, it was a fairly silent walk along the corridor here to the hospitality room where Mrs. Thatcher's entourage was waiting for her. Dennis, Carol, and one or two others. And she walked through the door here, and I don't think she knew what to expect. But when she saw their faces, there was no question mark. They thought it was a disgrace. For the first time, they thought she wasn't in charge during the election campaign. And Carol thought it was a perfect example of crass mischief and ineptitude by the BBC. After a period, it seemed like more than 20 seconds than 20 minutes, they were off into the car park and speeding away from a place they clearly thought was run by people who, at the very best, were liberal, and probably worse than that.
Not surprisingly, this was the last time the Prime Minister visited Lime Grove.
There's something that's missing, I think, that when this place was in its innocence, dreaming up how it could serve democracy by commenting on politics, that it thought it could do, and it's really discovered now that it can't really do. It can't play quite the full role that it had hoped to play, and instead is playing a much more ordered, structured approach to politics, which is fine, but it's that little bit of spice, I think, sometimes missing.
Lime Grove was always a place of historic firsts. What you're about to see now is an historic last. Over on this wall here, amidst the spaghetti harvest of wires, is a plug connected to this Late Show camera. And when I put it out, you will see the last image to come from the Lime Grove studios splutter, fade and die. The next night will be tomorrow night, but only for the ghosts of programmes past.
This is the BBC television service. Good evening. Once again, we have a few moments in hand before the next program, which gives us a chance to look at this interesting clock logo. Not to be outdone by the solely logo department, the BBC Clocks Workshop has been ticking away to produce this highly interesting pop art specimen entitled Imminently 8 with Parallel Scratches.
Hi there.
Here he is, chap.
It's not fair!
What's up? Eh?
What's up?
What
They're
is
not
it?
going to show my programmes.
Well, they might still, Fatso.
I've got the BBC Two schedule here, no bunter.
That's because you're a fat owl.
It's not.
Yes, it is, Fatso.
Look, I've had about enough of this.
Why don't you threaten to sit on them?
Shut up, you rotters. What?
What? Yes, go on. It's a good idea. It really is.
It's great.
Try it.
Yes!
Yeah, go out there and sit on BBC One and Two until they agree to put your programmes out.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and we'll come and cheer you. You sit on them, they come from
Yes, and then I'll make them broadcast my shows all day long for weeks.
Yeah, just make sure. It's fantastic. Make sure they don't redub you.
Oh, that's a point. I hate it when they do that. It makes people sound really stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, that's a brilliant wheeze. Sit on them.
Up in the air, the whole schedule with TV Times. We don't care. There goes the sporting life.
This is BBC Television, broadcasting from the Television Centre.
And back at the Television Centre, we now join John Ketley for The Weather View, 90s style.
Good evening. Well, we do believe the weather graphics have come an awful long way in the past 40 years, but sometimes the weather itself leaves a lot to be desired. Pretty good today, though. In Europe, you can see some very high temperatures, around about 31 degrees throughout the Mediterranean, but as high as 35 or 36 down through France and Spain. But on the evening satellite picture, we can see some very nasty thunderstorms brewing up in the same part of the world, and some nasty thunderstorms there running north out of Benidorm just at the present time. Over the next few days, if you're going away, it's going to stay hot and rather thundery in some eastern parts of Iberia, into southern parts of France, and further storms through Italy, the Alps and eastwards into the Balkans as well. Now, it's been pretty hot in this country today, up to 27 degrees, for instance, at Ross-on-Wye and at London. And even though northern parts of Britain were fairly cloudy, it was reasonably warm, up to 23 at Aberdeen on the eastern side of Scotland. But you can see rather more cloud on the satellite picture as you're headed north. Well, there's high pressure covering the country at the moment, and this very, very weak weather front which is slipping southwards, but all the time it's becoming weaker and weaker. But it's still giving a fair amount of cloud around the borders there, still giving the odd patch of rain and drizzle, and some rather murky conditions up on the hills and around the coast. But some dense patches of fog developing further south under those clear skies, and temperatures staying around about 13 or 14 degrees, the mid-50s all night. Up in the north of Scotland, where you get some clearances coming through, perhaps down to a rather chilly 10 there. Well, that's tomorrow's chart then, with this high pressure firmly established on our doorstep, and this weakening front just slipping away into the North Sea. It will mean a rather cloudy start, though, particularly around central and southern Scotland, coming down into northwest England and running through into Northern Ireland as well. I think most of the rain and drizzle, though, will virtually have died out by tomorrow morning. Plenty of hot sunshine as you head south, and some pleasant sunshine too up there in northeastern districts of Scotland. And late in the day, and probably after dark, you will find the cloud thickening once again with outbreaks of rain returning to northwest Ireland and the Western Isles of Scotland. So a pretty hot day tomorrow, up to 25 to 27 degrees in many parts of England and Wales. With all this cloud around, of course, it's going to be a bit cooler there, but around about 18 and 19, possibly 20 or 21 degrees, though, in the sunnier parts of northeast Scotland. So tomorrow evening you will find this thicker cloud bringing the rain up into northwestern districts of the country, and there'll be a freshening wind as well. And that sets the scene really for Wednesday, when you can see the high pressure still firmly established across England and Wales, these weather fronts clipping through Scotland and just about Northern Ireland as well. So there will be outbreaks of rain coming through, but the heaviest rain, the more persistent rain, will be up in the far north, where it will stay rather windy. Coming further south, though, with all this sunshine around, it looks like we're going to see temperatures every bit as high as tomorrow, could be even a little bit higher, up to 25, 26 or 27, so around about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to finish with the outlook for the World Athletics Championships taking place in Tokyo. Looks like it's going to turn rather more humid once again towards the end of the week, an increasing chance of some showers, but certainly very hot, temperatures around 32 degrees Celsius. That's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
Oh, mess.
BBC Two presents a season of Katharine Hepburn movies and the Katharine Hepburn Interview. She talks about her rise to stardom and, for the first time, her life with Spencer Tracy. The ups and downs of her extraordinary film career and her co-stars. The Katharine Hepburn Interview, tomorrow 9:30 on BBC Two.
Well, starting on BBC One in just over 10 minutes, except in Wales and Scotland, a visit to the floodlit esplanade of Edinburgh Castle for highlights of the Edinburgh Military Tattoo. Here on 2 in 25 minutes, Richie Benno looks back at today's play in the Test match between England and Sri Lanka at Lord's.